The quiet hum of the gas station was interrupted by the roar of motorcycles pulling in. A group of bikers, loud and brash, set their sights on a lone man refueling his truck. He wasn't flashy, didn't seem threatening, just another traveler passing through. But they were about to make a grave mistake. This wasn't an ordinary man. As the tension mounted, the soldier's calm demeanor masked a lifetime of training and discipline, waiting for the right moment to show that true strength lies in control. The sun was beginning its slow descent over the horizon, painting the sky in soft hues of orange and purple as the soldier pulled into the gas station. His truck, a rugged, mud-splattered machine built more for endurance than show, rolled to a stop at pump number 3. The hiss of the brakes echoed briefly before silence returned, broken only by the rhythmic clicking of the fuel meter as it counted the gallons flowing into his tank. The soldier, a man in his late 30s, exuded quiet confidence. His build was strong, powerful, but not exaggerated. His sharp eyes scanned the area, out of habit, not paranoia. Years of discipline had trained him to be aware of his surroundings without the need for constant alertness. To anyone else, he was just a regular guy, minding his own business. But underneath the surface, he was anything but ordinary. As he unscrewed the gas cap, the low rumble of engines grew louder from the road. A pack of motorcycles thundered toward the station, their chrome reflecting the dying sunlight. There were 6 of them, leather jackets, patches, and grim expressions, a stereotypical gang, but with a dangerous edge. The leader, a tall man with a scar running down his cheek, slowed first, his boots crunching against the gravel as he dismounted. The soldier noticed them immediately, not out of fear, but calculation. They were loud, reckless, and moving with the kind of swagger that demanded attention. He focused back on his fuel, keeping his posture relaxed but not vulnerable. His pulse didn't rise. This wasn't his first time in a tense situation. The bikers spread out, some heading into the small convenience store while 2 lingered near the pumps. One of them, a heavy-set man with a beer can in hand, stared in his direction, whispering something to the scar-faced leader. The leader grinned, shaking his head like he had just been challenged to prove a point. "Hey, bud," the leader called out, voice gravelly from years of smoking. The soldier didn't immediately respond. He wasn't being rude, just precise. He finished topping off the fuel, twisting the cap back with a deliberate turn. "You deaf or something?" the leader continued, stepping closer. The soldier finally turned, his expression calm, almost emotionless. "Need something?" The leader scoffed, hands resting on his belt where a knife handle was barely visible. "Yeah, we were just wondering if a tough guy like you needed help pumping gas. Don't want you straining yourself now." The soldier gave a slight nod, clearly unimpressed. "I'm good. Thanks." Something about his tone, that perfect blend of politeness and dismissive certainty, struck a nerve. The gang wasn't used to being brushed off. The heavy-set man took a step forward, clearly trying to make the soldier flinch. He didn't. Instead, the soldier grabbed his receipt from the pump, turned, and began heading toward the convenience store. He wasn't looking for a fight, not tonight. He had a long drive ahead. This was just a pit stop. But the bikers weren't finished. The scar-faced leader exchanged a look with his men before following, his boots crunching on the gravel. "You think you're better than us?" he growled from behind. "Look at you, clean cut, thinking you're too good to even have a conversation?" The soldier paused in the doorway, glancing over his shoulder. His face remained calm, but there was an unmistakable shift in his stance. "I don't want trouble. Let it go." The air grew heavier. Inside the gas station, the cashier, a young woman barely out of high school, watched with wide eyes as the scene unfolded. The soldier's presence filled the space, steady but undeniably tense now. He was in control, but so was the gang, for the moment. Scarface grinned, sensing the tension. "See, here's the thing," he continued. "You don't just get to brush us off. When a man talks to you, you answer. Or are you too scared?" The soldier's gaze didn't waver. He met Scarface's eyes with the kind of steady look that made men hesitate before speaking again. But Scarface didn't hesitate. He stepped closer, puffing out his chest as the two other bikers flanked him. For a heartbeat, the station seemed to hold its breath. The soldier broke the silence with a single word. "Walk." Scarface blinked. "What?" "Walk away, now." His voice was calm, but the weight behind it hit like a hammer. Controlled, steady, dangerous. Scarface didn't back down. Not yet. He smirked and shoved the soldier's shoulder, a move designed more for show than harm. The soldier barely shifted, but that was the mistake. In a blur, the soldier's hand shot out, gripping Scarface's wrist in a hold so precise it forced him to his knees before he could react. The entire movement was fluid, effortless. Scarface yelped, not in pain but in complete shock. The soldier didn't tighten the hold. He didn't need to. His voice remained calm. "I told you. Walk away." Scarface stumbled back as the soldier released him, cradling his wrist as his gang members exchanged wide-eyed glances. The message had been sent. But this was far from over. The tension inside the gas station lingered like static in the air. Scarface, still rubbing his wrist, glared at the soldier with a mixture of humiliation and fury. The other bikers hadn't moved yet, processing what they'd just witnessed. The cashier, frozen behind the counter, looked as though she was debating whether to call the police. But the soldier, he was calm. Too calm. He turned back to the fridge section, grabbing a bottle of water and a protein bar, moving with the same measured control as before. Scarface's breathing had quickened, his ego bruised far more than his body. His pride demanded retaliation. The automatic door chimed as another of the bikers stepped in. A lean man with tattoos running up his neck called out, "Troy, you good?" Scarface, Troy, nodded, trying to mask his shaken demeanor. Yeah, just a misunderstanding." But his voice betrayed him, still tight with embarrassment. The soldier approached the counter, setting down his items. The young cashier scanned them in silence, her hands trembling slightly. As the total flashed on the screen, the soldier reached into his wallet, producing a crisp $20 bill. He didn't break eye contact with Troy, but didn't speak either. Control. It was all about control. Troy's gang was waiting for the signal, that unspoken call for escalation. But the leader hesitated. Deep down, he knew there was something different about this man. That grip. Too precise. The way he moved. Too smooth. But anger clouded his judgment. The soldier collected his change, turned back toward the door, and paused. Just long enough to deliver one last message. His voice remained quiet, but the authority was unmistakable. "I gave you a chance to walk away. Don't make me give you another." The door swung open, and the soldier walked out, the sound of his boots fading as he returned to his truck. But Troy wasn't done. Not even close. "Who does he think he is?" Troy spat, his face flushed. The tattooed biker, Snake, leaned in. "You want us to handle him, boss?" Troy clenched his jaw. "Not here, but he's not getting away with this. No one makes me look like a fool." Outside, the soldier climbed into his truck, taking a slow breath as he started the ignition. He'd seen this before. Ego-driven men unable to let go of a challenge. It wasn't personal. It never was. But it could get dangerous. And he wasn't about to let anyone catch him off guard. He pulled out onto the road, checking his mirrors carefully. Sure enough, the rumble of motorcycles followed. Not all of them. Just 3, including Troy. They were keeping their distance for now, but the message was clear. This wasn't over. The road stretched long and empty ahead. The soldier considered his options. He could lose them easily. Years of tactical driving taught him how to vanish when necessary. But running? No, that wasn't his style. If they wanted to follow, let them. He had nothing to hide. Minutes passed in silence, the hum of the truck's engine steady. But the bikers crept closer, the growl of their engines growing louder. Finally, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Troy made his move. The motorcycles surged forward, flanking the truck on both sides. One of the bikers, Snake, veered dangerously close, rapping his knuckles against the passenger window. "Pull over, tough guy." The soldier didn't respond. He kept his hands steady, eyes scanning the road ahead. He could feel the tension climbing, the adrenaline rising, but he controlled it. They were playing a game, and he had already won. They just didn't know it yet. Troy sped up, cutting in front of the truck and braking hard. The soldier reacted instantly, slowing without panic, but his eyes narrowed. Enough was enough. He signaled, guiding his truck into a deserted rest stop just ahead. Gravel crunched beneath his tires as he came to a halt under the dim lights of a single street lamp. The motorcycles followed, engines cutting off one by one. The silence that followed was deafening. Troy dismounted first, the sound of his boots echoing in the empty lot. His two friends followed, less confident but committed. The soldier stepped out of his truck, standing tall, his gaze unwavering as he shut the door behind him. Troy spread his arms wide. "Well, here we are. No more running. Why don't you show us what you're really made of, soldier boy?" The word soldier hit differently this time. The fact Troy had guessed it, or maybe just assumed, wasn't a coincidence. The soldier tilted his head slightly. "You sure about this?" Troy sneered. "You embarrassed me back there. I don't take kindly to that." The soldier nodded once, folding his arms across his chest. "I told you to walk away. I warned you. But here you are. Last chance." Snake shifted uncomfortably. The third biker, a younger man barely out of his 20s, whispered, "Troy, maybe we should—" Troy cut him off. "Shut it. This ain't about you. It's about respect." The soldier exhaled slowly. Control. Always control. He wouldn't throw the first punch, but if they crossed the line, he was ready. And Troy crossed it. He lunged, sloppy, emotional, predictable. The soldier sidestepped, pivoting gracefully. His hand shot out, catching Troy's wrist again. But this time, he added pressure. Not enough to break, just enough to hurt. Troy howled, dropping to his knees once more. Snake took a step forward, but the soldier's voice stopped him cold. "Don't. I've been patient. I've given you every chance to walk away. But you keep pushing. You think strength is about proving yourself. It's not. Strength is knowing when to stop." Troy grimaced, still on his knees. You think you're better than us?" The soldier released his grip, letting Troy collapse fully onto the gravel. His voice dropped to a whisper. "No. I'm just trained." Silence. The bikers didn't move as the soldier stepped back into his truck, his point made without saying another word. But as he drove off into the night, he knew this wasn't the end. Troy's pride wouldn't let it be. The night air felt heavier as the soldier drove away from the gas station rest stop. His hands remained steady on the wheel, but his instincts were sharper than ever. The confrontation hadn't settled. Men like Troy didn't walk away quietly. They didn't understand restraint, mistaking it for weakness, and that made them dangerous. The glow of his headlights carved a narrow path through the darkened road, the hum of his truck's engine steady, controlled, just like him. Yet in the rearview mirror, shadows danced. The sound of distant engines still echoed faintly behind him. They were following again. A calm breath. No anger, no fear, just awareness. Years of training had ingrained that level of control deep into his core. He didn't react emotionally, he calculated. If they were stupid enough to escalate this, they would only hurt themselves. The rumble grew louder. The headlights of the motorcycles flared back into view as Troy and his men caught up once more, their engines growling as they closed in. This time, the soldier knew they wouldn't settle for intimidation. The first bike accelerated, cutting dangerously close to his truck's rear bumper. The second flanked the left side, edging toward the driver's window. The soldier slowed slightly, eyes narrowing. His mind was already 2 steps ahead, evaluating angles, escape routes, possible threats, Every detail mattered. The road ahead opened to a deserted stretch, empty but illuminated by patches of orange streetlights. It was the perfect spot for an ambush. Troy knew it too. The leader of the pack pulled alongside, his scarred face twisted in a grim smile as he gestured for the soldier to stop. The truck remained steady. No reaction. Troy revved his engine, shouting over the roar, "You think you're better than us, huh? Let's see how tough you are when you're out of that cage." The soldier remained silent, calm. He didn't take the bait, but Troy wasn't looking for consent. The gang leader suddenly swerved, clipping the truck's fender with a sharp metallic scrape. The jolt was minor, but enough to make a point. Enough to test him. The soldier clenched the wheel tighter. Not in anger. Calculation. Control. Always control. But now he had to send a message. He took a deep breath and veered toward the shoulder, easing the truck to a stop beneath a flickering streetlight. Gravel crunched under his tires. Behind him, the motorcycles slowed, circling like predators around their prey. The soldier opened his door, stepping out into the cool night air. His face remained unreadable, composed. His boots crunched softly on the gravel as he straightened, his stance relaxed but commanding. He didn't need to posture. His presence alone was enough. Troy dismounted first, his gang close behind. Snake, always the follower, lingered at his side while the younger biker, the hesitant one from earlier, looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight as if reconsidering his choices. The soldier spoke first, his voice even. "You've followed me long enough. Say what you need to say." Troy spat on the ground. "You embarrassed me back there, tough guy. Made me look weak in front of my crew. We don't let that slide." The soldier nodded slowly. "You made a choice to threaten me. I gave you a warning. I didn't harm you. You chose to escalate. Now, here we are." Troy's eyes narrowed. "You think you're smarter than me? Huh? Think you can just talk your way out of this?" The soldier's gaze remained locked. "I'm not here to prove anything. But if you want to fight, I won't hold back next time." The younger biker, clearly unnerved, stepped forward. "Troy, maybe we should—" "Shut it, Cody," Troy snapped. "This ain't about you." The soldier saw it now, cracks in the gang's unity. Cody wasn't a true believer. He was caught in Troy's ego-driven warpath. Snake, on the other hand, was loyal, but scared. Their leader was unraveling and they could feel it. Troy took another step closer, chest puffed out. "You gonna fight me, soldier boy, or you too scared?" The soldier's voice dropped to a whisper, deadly calm. "I'm not scared, but you should be." Troy lunged. It was a mistake. The soldier sidestepped with effortless precision, sweeping Troy's leg and sending him sprawling hard onto the gravel. He didn't strike, just incapacitated, controlled. Troy groaned, humiliated yet again. His pride was wounded far deeper than his body. Snake took a half-step forward, fists clenching, but the soldier's gaze met his, and Snake stopped cold. "You want to end up like him?" the soldier said softly. Snake shook his head slowly, stepping back. Troy, still coughing, pushed himself onto his elbows, rage burning in his eyes. This ain't over." The soldier knelt, his voice low but powerful. "It is over, but you're too proud to see it. Pride makes you weak. Real strength is knowing when to stop." Troy stared up at him, words catching in his throat. He had no comeback, no control. The soldier stood, turning back to his truck. "Next time, I won't be so patient." As the truck's engine roared back to life, the bikers were left in the dust, stunned, silent, and shattered. But the soldier knew better. Troy's type didn't learn lessons easily. This wasn't over. The hum of the truck's engine blended with the rhythmic thrum of tires against asphalt as the soldier drove deeper into the night. The confrontation had ended, at least for now, but the instincts etched into his bones whispered otherwise. This wasn't over. Men like Troy didn't walk away quietly. He had seen this behavior before, reckless, ego-driven men who mistook restraint for weakness. He wasn't a stranger to their kind. Pride could be a dangerous fuel, and Troy's had been scorched. The distant headlights in his rearview mirror had disappeared for now, but he remained cautious, alert. Every glance toward his side mirrors reminded him they could return, and this time Troy wouldn't just be trying to save face. He'd be out for blood. The soldier exhaled slowly, centering himself. The key to mastering situations like this wasn't physical strength, it was control, the discipline to act only when necessary. Still, he couldn't shake the sensation that Troy's wounded pride would fester into something far more dangerous. Miles later, the glow of a roadside diner caught his eye. He hadn't eaten since early morning, and his body reminded him with a dull ache of hunger. Parking carefully on the far side of the lot, he scanned the area before shutting off the engine. No motorcycles, no threats. Yet. The diner was nearly empty, the kind of quiet truck stop built for long hauls and restless drivers. A lone waitress wiped down the counter, an older man nursed coffee in the corner, and a tired-looking father corralled 2 kids at a booth. Peaceful. For now. Sliding into a corner booth with a clear view of the door, the soldier ordered black coffee and a turkey sandwich. His mind was still analyzing the night's events, replaying every detail. Troy's aggression, the hesitation in Cody's eyes, Snake's barely concealed fear. The dynamic was fragile, ready to shatter with the right push. The food arrived, but he barely touched it. His focus lingered elsewhere, on the door. The bell chimed. A figure entered. Cody. The younger biker, the hesitant one, was standing just inside the entrance, scanning the diner until his eyes landed on the soldier. For a long moment, neither man moved. Tension gripped the air, but there was no aggression in Cody's posture. The soldier gestured subtly for him to sit. The young biker hesitated before sliding into the booth across from him, keeping his hands visible on the table. A smart move. "Didn't expect to see you here," the soldier said evenly, breaking the silence. Cody swallowed hard, his voice quieter than expected. "Look, I'm not here to start anything. Troy doesn't know I'm here." The soldier nodded once, waiting. Cody leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "He's not going to let this go. He feels like you humiliated him. Tonight was bad enough, but what you did out there at the rest stop, that was—" "A warning," the soldier interrupted. His voice was calm but firm. "And it should have ended there." Cody nodded slowly, rubbing the back of his neck. "It should have, but it won't. Troy's calling in. Backup." The soldier's eyes narrowed slightly. "What kind of backup?" Cody hesitated, glancing toward the window like he feared being overheard. "Some guys from out of town. Real bad types, not just a bunch of rowdy bikers. They run guns, drugs, worse. I tried telling Troy it's not worth it, but he's too proud. Thinks you made him look weak." The soldier took a measured breath, absorbing the information. He wasn't dealing with a local biker gang anymore. If Troy was reaching beyond his circle, the stakes had just shifted. "I appreciate the warning," the soldier finally said. "But you're still here. Why?" Cody lowered his head. "I didn't sign up for this. I thought it was just a brotherhood, riding, partying. But Troy's changed. It's not just about bikes anymore. It's about control, fear. I'm tired of it." The soldier studied him carefully. There was sincerity in his voice, regret even. But that didn't make Cody safe. He was still connected to them, still compromised. And yet, there was a chance, however slim, that he was genuine. "Why come to me? You could have just walked away," the soldier pressed. Cody shook his head, voice cracking slightly. "I tried, but Troy, he doesn't let people walk away, not without consequences." Silence settled between them, heavy with unspoken truths. The soldier took a long sip of his coffee, considering his next words carefully. "I don't want trouble," he finally said, "but I'm not running either. If Troy makes the wrong choice, it won't end well for him." Cody nodded, a mixture of relief and fear on his face. "I know. That's why I'm here. I'm done with this. After tonight, I'm out. But you need to be careful. Troy's not thinking straight." The soldier finished his coffee, setting the mug down with a quiet clink. "I'm always careful." Cody stood, nodding once more before turning toward the door. But just as he reached the exit, the bell chimed, and the sound of roaring engines filled the night air outside. Troy had arrived. The soldier remained seated as the first shadows moved past the diner windows. 3 bikes, no, 4, rumbling into the parking lot. Troy, Snake, and 2 unfamiliar men with hard eyes and cruel smiles. Cody froze. Trapped between the door and the gang he'd just betrayed, the soldier stood slowly, sliding a few bills onto the table. Calm. Controlled. Troy's voice echoed from outside, loud enough to rattle the windows. "Come on out, soldier boy. Let's finish this." The soldier glanced toward Cody. "You still have a choice. Stay out of this, or get hurt." Cody nodded, pressing his back against the wall, staying put as the soldier stepped outside into the cool night air. Troy stood at the center, flanked by the 2 new bikers and Snake. Their body language said everything. The fight was inevitable. But the soldier wasn't afraid. He was ready. The night air felt colder, heavier, as the soldier stepped out of the diner's warm glow and into the gravel parking lot where Troy and his gang waited. The rumble of their engines had silenced, but the tension filled the void like a loaded gun waiting to fire. Troy stood front and center, fists clenched at his sides, his scarred face twisted with the kind of anger only wounded pride could create. Snake lingered just behind him, shifting uneasily, while the 2 new bikers, grizzled, hardened, dangerous, flanked him on either side. These weren't just local thugs anymore. These were hired muscle. The soldier stood tall, his calm gaze scanning the group without flinching. His military instincts assessed everything: their stances, breathing patterns, proximity to weapons. Every detail was a calculation, filed away in milliseconds. Behind him, the diner door creaked open slightly. Cody peeked out, fear painted across his face, but he remained inside. The soldier had already warned him, "Stay out of this." Troy took a step forward, voice echoing across the empty lot. "You think you're a big man, huh? Humiliating me? Making me look like a fool? Not tonight. No more warnings. We're going to settle this, right here." The soldier's voice remained calm but firm. "You brought this on yourself, Troy. I didn't seek this fight, but if you cross this line, I won't hold back." Troy's eyes narrowed, his lip curling. "What line?" The soldier raised his hand, motioning to the gravel beneath his boots. "This one. You step past it. You take responsibility for what happens next." Snake shifted uncomfortably, as if realizing how close this was to spiraling out of control. But the new bikers, they were waiting for it. One of them, a tall man with a long, jagged scar down his neck, grinned darkly and spat onto the ground. Troy's ego wouldn't let him back down. He took a step forward, then another, until his worn boots crossed the invisible line. "I'm not scared of you, soldier boy," he hissed. "You're all talk. Let's see what you can do when you're not hiding behind your words." The soldier nodded, his face hardening into stone. "I warned you." Troy swung first. Wild, emotional, predictable. The soldier reacted with trained precision. His hand shot up, catching Troy's wrist mid-strike, twisting it outward just enough to force a yelp of pain, but not enough to break. Not yet. With a swift pivot, he turned Troy's momentum against him, forcing the gang leader to stumble forward and collapse onto the gravel in a coughing heap. The 2 hired muscle surged forward next. The soldier didn't wait. The scarred biker lunged with a knife, sloppy, aggressive. The blade flashed under the dim streetlight, but the soldier sidestepped, his hand snapping out to seize the biker's wrist. A swift twist, and the knife clattered harmlessly to the ground. Without hesitation, the soldier planted his elbow into the man's ribs, sending him sprawling with a pained grunt. The second thug wasn't as reckless. He moved slower, circling, fists raised like a boxer trained in street brawls. But the soldier had seen this before. The man swung, and the soldier shifted his head just enough to avoid the blow, barely missing contact. A counterstrike followed. The soldier delivered a precise palm strike to the attacker's sternum, knocking the wind from his lungs. The man staggered back, gasping for breath. And then, silence. Troy, humiliated, lay on his side, wheezing. The scarred thug clutched his arm, and the second gasped for air, doubled over. Snake hadn't moved. He looked frozen, torn between loyalty and self-preservation. The soldier remained steady, not a single movement wasted. He hadn't broken a sweat. "Troy," he said, voice calm yet filled with unshakable authority. "This ends here. No more threats. No more chasing me down. I'm giving you a choice. Walk away, while you still can." Troy's face twisted in pain and rage, but his body betrayed him. He knew he couldn't win, not against someone like this, but pride was a stubborn enemy. "You think you're better than me." The soldier's expression softened slightly. "No, but I'm smarter, and I know when a fight isn't worth the cost." Snake finally spoke up, voice quiet but cutting through the night. "Troy. He's right. Let it go, man." Troy's head snapped toward his friend, betrayal flashing in his eyes. "You're taking his side?" Snake shook his head. "No, I'm just tired of this. Look at us. Look where this got you." Silence. Cody, still watching from the diner, seemed to hold his breath. The soldier took a step back, watching for any sign of retaliation. "This can be the end, or it can get worse. Your call." Troy's hand curled into a fist, but he didn't rise. He stayed there on the ground, defeated but not broken. The soldier nodded once. "I hope you make the right choice." Without another word, he turned, moving back toward his truck. The gravel crunched softly under his boots, his heart still calm, controlled. He climbed back into the driver's seat, watching in his side mirror as Troy slowly pulled himself to his feet, shame painted across his face. The engines of the bikes roared back to life, but they didn't follow this time. As the truck pulled back onto the highway, the soldier knew this night had been more than a scuffle. It had been a lesson. For Troy, for Snake, even for Cody. But lessons like these didn't always stick, and deep down, he had a sinking feeling this wasn't the last time their paths would cross. Because pride could be the most dangerous enemy of all. The open road stretched endlessly before the soldier as he left the gas station far behind. The faint glow of the diner lights had long since faded in his rearview mirror, replaced by the vast darkness of the rural highway. The rhythmic hum of the truck's engine was the only sound, steady and calm, much like him. But inside, his thoughts remained sharp, calculated. Troy wouldn't let this go. The humiliation had been too public, too personal. The gang leader wasn't just bruised physically. His pride had taken a beating it couldn't recover from. Men like Troy thrived on dominance, and when that dominance was challenged, they became reckless. The soldier's fingers flexed slightly against the steering wheel. His body was still calm, but his mind was already preparing for the next move. Tactical thinking was second nature. Evaluating threats, angles, next steps. He had given Troy every opportunity to stand down. But men consumed by ego rarely saw reason until it was too late. The highway remained empty, silent except for the occasional passing truck. He was grateful for the quiet. His entire life had been built on moments like this, the calm between storms. And in his experience, storms always came back stronger. A sign loomed ahead. Rest stop. 2 miles. He debated skipping it, but knew better. His instincts told him to regroup, assess, and prepare for the possibility that Troy wasn't done yet. Pulling into the rest stop, the truck hissed to a halt beneath dim overhead lights. The lot was nearly deserted, save for a lone RV and a parked semi. No bikes, no threats. He killed the engine, scanning the area once more. Nothing out of the ordinary. But the tension in his chest hadn't fully eased. Something still felt off. The soldier climbed out, stretching his back after the long drive. The cool night air bit against his skin, but he welcomed the chill. It kept him focused. Moving toward the vending machines, he grabbed a bottle of water and lingered for a moment, listening to the silence. Listening for anything that felt wrong. A sound broke the quiet. The distant hum of engines. He turned, expression hardening as the low growl approached from the far end of the highway. 2 headlights pierced the darkness, then another. 3 bikes, closing in fast. Troy. The soldier didn't move, he didn't run. His pulse remained steady as the motorcycles slowed, circling the rest stop lot like sharks. They weren't coming to talk. The bikes skidded to a halt, engines cutting off simultaneously. Troy was first off his bike, followed by Snake and the scarred biker from earlier. This time Troy's face was contorted not with rage, but with cold, simmering hatred. "You just couldn't leave well enough alone, huh?" Troy sneered, voice echoing under the dim lights. The soldier remained still, calm. He wasn't surprised. "I gave you a choice. You made yours." Troy chuckled bitterly, shaking his head. "You humiliated me twice, in front of my own crew. I'm not walking away after that." The soldier nodded, his voice calm but unwavering. "You're making a mistake. I didn't come here looking for trouble, but you keep chasing it." Troy's face twisted further. "Yeah? Well, tonight, trouble found you." The scarred biker reached into his jacket, producing a length of chain. Snake shifted uneasily but didn't move forward. He could see it. Snake was losing faith. But Troy, he was too far gone. The soldier's gaze never wavered. "You want to fight? Fine. But you won't win." Troy barked a bitter laugh. "Think you're some kind of hero, huh? Just a man with a truck and a fancy way of talking. Let's see if your fists back it up this time." The scarred biker lashed the chain against the concrete with a metallic snap. The soldier didn't flinch. His training took over, measuring distance, weight distribution, wind direction, and possible exits. Control. Always control. Troy lunged first, predictable as ever. The soldier sidestepped, pivoting smoothly as he caught Troy's arm, redirecting the momentum into a swift takedown. Troy hit the gravel hard, coughing in pain but scrambling back to his feet. The scarred biker swung the chain next. The soldier ducked low, the chain whipping past his face by inches. Without missing a beat, he seized the attacker's wrist, twisting with just enough pressure to make him drop the weapon. A swift, elbow strike to the ribs sent the man stumbling backward, clutching his side. Snake remained frozen, watching everything unfold. The soldier took a breath, voice echoing with quiet authority. "This is over. Walk away while you still can." But Troy wasn't done. Not yet. Gritting his teeth, he surged forward again, this time with a knife drawn from his belt. The blade flashed under the lights. The soldier reacted instantly. His hand clamped around Troy's wrist, twisting the weapon from his grip with a fluid disarm. A sharp, controlled strike to the inside of the elbow sent the knife clattering to the ground. Troy crumpled, clutching his arm in pain but glaring up, still defiant. The soldier stared down at him, breathing steady, pulse unchanged. "This is what happens when you let pride control you," he said softly, voice like steel. "You don't know when to stop." Troy spat blood onto the gravel, eyes burning with hatred. You got lucky." The soldier shook his head. "No, I gave you every chance to walk away. But you chose this. You lost because you never understood the real meaning of strength." Silence. The scarred biker pulled himself to his feet, favoring his ribs. But he didn't charge again. He looked at Troy, then back at the soldier. There was fear in his eyes now. Respect, even. Snake finally spoke, voice hoarse. "It's over, man. Just let it go." Troy slumped back, defeated, but not broken. Not yet. The soldier stepped back, maintaining distance. "I hope you've learned something tonight, but if you keep coming, I won't be so patient next time." He turned, climbing back into his truck without another word. The engine roared to life, the headlights cutting through the night as he pulled away from the rest stop. But he could feel it. Troy's rage wasn't extinguished. It was only smoldering. And men like him? They didn't stay down for long. The night stretched endlessly as the soldier drove, the rhythmic hum of the truck's engine the only sound piercing the silence. His grip on the wheel remained steady, yet his mind replayed the confrontation at the rest stop. Troy's face twisted with hatred, the scarred biker's fear, Snake's hesitation. This wasn't over. The way Troy had looked at him, that wasn't the face of a man who had learned a lesson. It was the face of someone planning revenge. Pride didn't just make men reckless. It made them dangerous. The soldier had seen it before, on battlefields far from home, in alleyways overseas, in situations where control was the only thing separating survival from disaster. And it always followed the same pattern: escalation. His eyes shifted to the rearview mirror. Nothing. The empty road behind him held no shadows, no glowing headlights. Yet the tension wouldn't leave his chest. His instincts rarely failed him. Troy wasn't finished. The rest stop was a turning point, not an ending. But the soldier knew better than to dwell on what he couldn't control. He had taken the high road, warned them, defended himself, and spared them further injury when he could have gone much further. He wasn't looking for violence. He never had been. And yet violence had a way of finding him. A sudden vibration broke the silence, his phone buzzing in the center console. Without glancing away from the road, he tapped the screen. A text message. Unknown number. "You think you're tough? We're not done. Watch your back." The soldier exhaled, his jaw tightening. Troy. He remained calm. No panic, no reaction. This was expected. Men like Troy didn't know how to lose, but threats made in the dark over a phone didn't rattle him. They only confirmed what he already knew. The storm was coming. He let the phone drop back into the cup holder, the message unanswered. If Troy wanted a fight, he wouldn't be warning him. He'd be acting. The fact that he was posturing instead told the soldier that part of him was still afraid. Good. But fear mixed with ego was a dangerous cocktail, and Troy was too stubborn to let the lesson sink in. Several miles later, the soldier spotted a motel sign glowing faintly through the darkness. Vacancy. Perfect. He needed rest, not just physically but mentally. Every inch of his body remained taut, his mind still operating in high alert since the last encounter. Pulling into the gravel lot, he shut off the engine and scanned the area out of habit. The motel was quiet, almost too quiet. Only 3 cars occupied the far end of the lot. No bikes, no signs of Troy. Yet. The air felt still as he approached the front desk. A tired-looking clerk greeted him without enthusiasm, processing his reservation with minimal conversation. The soldier appreciated the silence. He wasn't here for conversation. As he turned the key in the lock and pushed open the door to his room, that ever-present awareness returned. Small space, 1 window, a single exit, bed against the far wall. He could see every angle. But something wasn't right. The air felt off. He scanned the room again. No signs of forced entry. No disturbance. Yet the sensation wouldn't leave, the feeling of being watched. The soldier moved to the window, parting the cheap blinds just enough to scan the parking lot. Nothing. No Troy. No bikes. But the feeling persisted. It was only when he noticed the faintest shift of light against the far wall that his mind caught it. The reflection of a camera lens, small, discreet, planted carefully behind the room's television set. Someone had been watching him. Calmly, the soldier approached the device. A small pinhole camera, barely the size of a coin, tucked near the ventilation slot. He plucked it from its hiding place, examining it with a careful grip. Wireless. Cheap but effective for short-range surveillance. A message. They were watching, and they wanted him to know. He exhaled, placing the device in the center of the nightstand as if inviting whoever had planted it to come retrieve it. He wasn't running. He wasn't hiding. If they were going to keep pushing, he'd face it head on. Midnight arrived and the motel remained quiet. No engines, no movement. Yet the soldier remained awake, seated in the corner chair facing the door, his back against the wall. His mind was calm, composed, yet completely prepared for whatever came next. And then, faintly, he heard it. The distant rumble of engines. Slow, steady. It wasn't a show of power this time. It was calculated. They were circling, testing him. The sound grew louder, closer, then stopped. Silence again. The soldier rose, moving to the window just in time to catch the flash of a shadow disappearing behind the trucks in the lot. Troy wasn't done, but the soldier didn't react. He let the shadow think he had the advantage. Control. Always control. And when the moment came to end this, it would be on his terms. The faint scent of old carpet mixed with the metallic tang of tension as the soldier remained seated in the corner of his motel room, calm but unyielding. The low hum of the distant engines had faded, but he knew Troy and his men hadn't left. They were circling, watching, waiting for the right moment to make their move. But he was waiting too. Control. Always control. The pinhole camera sat untouched on the nightstand, still facing the door as if daring them to make their next move. The soldier had made sure it was visible now, sending his own message back. "I see you." Outside, the night remained still, the motel's parking lot bathed in pale yellow light. Only the occasional rustling of leaves filled the silence. But the tension was building, unspoken and invisible, lingering like a storm preparing to break. The soldier checked his watch. 2:17 a.m. They were taking their time, drawing it out. That told him one thing. Troy wasn't acting alone anymore. This wasn't just about ego anymore. It was about revenge. Calculated, patient revenge. And that made it all the more dangerous. A noise. A faint creak from the hallway outside. The soldier's head shifted slightly, his breathing slowing as his senses heightened. Footsteps. Soft. Controlled. Someone was trying not to be heard. The doorknob rattled. Not violently. Not a forced entry. Yet. A test. Someone checking for vulnerabilities. The soldier's pulse didn't rise. He remained still, silent, waiting. Click. The lock twisted halfway before stopping. The soldier narrowed his eyes, watching the shadow beneath the door shift slightly. They were probing, trying to see if he was asleep. Big mistake. A few more seconds of silence. Then, retreating footsteps. He exhaled slowly, knowing what was coming next. They were testing his defenses, searching for weaknesses, but he had none. He stayed awake, listening. Every creak of the floorboards above, every gust of wind outside, every distant hum of a vehicle on the nearby highway. But no further disturbances. Not tonight. By morning, the sun had barely begun to rise when the soldier left the motel. The air was sharp, the early chill biting at his skin as he stepped into the parking lot. His truck sat untouched, right where he'd left it, but his instincts kept him cautious. He performed a full sweep around the vehicle, checking for signs of tampering. No slashed tires, no tracker underneath. But the faint smudge near the driver's side window told him someone had been there, watching him, close enough to leave a trace. As he climbed into the truck, a folded piece of paper fluttered from under the windshield wiper. He opened it carefully. The handwriting was jagged, almost rushed. "This isn't over. You'll know when it is." No signature, no threats of violence, just a reminder that Troy's ego was still burning. The soldier exhaled. He knew how men like Troy operated. The problem wasn't the threat, it was the waiting, the unpredictability, the fact that Troy wasn't just looking for a fight anymore. He wanted humiliation, retaliation. This wouldn't end with a scuffle. Troy was planning something bigger. The soldier folded the note, tucking it into his pocket. His next move was clear: get ahead of the threat. By midday, the soldier found himself parked outside a dusty roadhouse on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where rumors traveled faster than the wind, and local troublemakers nursed grudges over cheap whiskey. He wasn't here for the drinks. He was here for information. The door creaked open as he entered, the scent of stale beer mingling with cigarette smoke. A jukebox played quietly in the corner, and a handful of regulars eyed him from their seats. One man, sitting alone near the back with a beer bottle half empty, caught his attention. Snake. Troy's second in command. The soldier approached calmly, boots echoing against the wooden floor. Snake noticed him instantly, tensing as his hand drifted toward his belt. "Relax," the soldier said quietly. "I'm not here for trouble." Snake's eyes narrowed. "Yeah? Could have fooled me." The soldier slid into the booth across from him, resting his arms on the table in a way that was calm but still commanding. "I need to know where Troy is." Snake exhaled, shaking his head. "Why?" "So you can finish what you started." The soldier's gaze didn't waver. "No, so I can stop this before it goes too far. I'm not your enemy, Snake, but if Troy keeps pushing, it's going to end badly. For him. For all of you." Snake looked away, clearly wrestling with his loyalty. "Look, you should just leave town. He's not thinking straight. He's got guys coming in. Bad ones. Outlaws from out of state. They're not like us. They don't fight fair." The soldier's jaw tightened. "I'm not leaving. I gave Troy every chance to walk away. Now I'm giving you one. Tell me where he is." Snake hesitated, but the truth was already visible in his face. He wasn't scared of the soldier. He was scared of Troy, scared of what would happen if he betrayed him. Finally, Snake muttered, "He's laying low. Some old storage yard near the North Bridge. But listen, man, it's not just him anymore. They're planning something big." The soldier nodded once, already rising from his seat. "I know. And I'm going to end it before it starts." He left without another word, the door swinging shut behind him as the wind howled softly outside. The storm wasn't coming anymore. It was already here. The storage yard by the North Bridge was the kind of place where shadows lingered a little too long. Rusted shipping containers and forgotten equipment loomed in the dim light, the air thick with the scent of oil and damp earth. The soldier had been here before. Not this exact spot, but places just like it, the kind where bad deals were made and worse men gathered. He remained concealed, crouched behind a stack of weathered pallets, watching, calculating. Troy's gang had multiplied. What had started as a petty scuffle in a gas station had drawn in something larger, dangerous. 5 bikes were parked near the gate, but that wasn't the troubling part. The black SUV tucked just beyond the fence, its engine still warm, spoke volumes. The men Troy had called in weren't local toughs anymore. They were enforcers, hired muscle from out of state, just like Snake had warned. The soldier counted 7 men in total: Troy, Snake, and 5 newcomers. Hardened types, scarred faces, tattoos with meanings that went beyond rebellion. These men had seen real violence, and they were preparing for it again. Troy stood near the center of the yard, his voice echoing across the open space as he paced back and forth. The soldier couldn't hear every word, but he caught enough. "Made me look weak. No more warnings. No more games. We find him tonight. End this." Snake stood back, arms crossed, clearly uncomfortable. His eyes flicked toward the gate as if searching for an exit. The soldier took note of that. Snake was close to breaking away. He just needed the right push. The hired muscle, though, they weren't here for loyalty. They were here for blood. The soldier exhaled slowly, centering himself. This situation was rapidly escalating beyond a bar fight. Troy was turning it into a vendetta, one he wasn't prepared to lose. But the soldier had faced far worse odds before. He scanned the perimeter. 2 obvious sentries near the far side of the fence, both armed with knives strapped to their belts. The others remained closer to Troy, keeping their distance but clearly prepared for violence. The question wasn't whether Troy would come after him again. It was when. The soldier adjusted his stance, moving silently along the outer fence, keeping low. He needed more information, more leverage. His training whispered every calculated step, every measured breath. This was reconnaissance. Patience was the weapon now. Until Troy turned his back to the group, phone raised to his ear. "Yeah, tomorrow night. The old mill. No cops, no games. He'll be there. Trust me." The soldier's jaw tightened. Tomorrow night, Troy was setting a trap. For him. The sound of gravel shifting caught his attention. Snake, breaking away from the group, moving toward the fence on his own. Alone. It was now or never. The soldier moved like a shadow, intercepting Snake just as he neared the gate. Before Snake could react, the soldier had his hand over his mouth, pressing him back against the cold metal. "Don't. Move." Snake's eyes went wide with fear, but quickly softened when he recognized who it was. The soldier slowly released his grip, stepping back, but his gaze remained hard. "You're in over your head, Snake," the soldier whispered, voice low and firm. "This isn't a bar fight anymore. These men Troy called, they're dangerous." Snake swallowed hard, his breath visible in the cold air. I know, man. I didn't sign up for this. I told him we should just let it go, but he won't. He's lost it." The soldier's voice stayed steady. "It's not too late for you. But if you stay with them, you're making yourself part of this. You know what these men are capable of, and you know what I'm capable of." Snake nodded, guilt flashing across his face. "He's planning something big tomorrow. The old mill. I heard him talking about it. Said he's bringing everyone, guns, the whole crew. You gotta leave town, man. It's not worth this." The soldier's gaze narrowed. He's not after just a fight anymore. He wants a message, and I can't let that happen. Snake shook his head, his voice desperate. "Then let me help you. I don't want to be part of this anymore. A shout from the yard interrupted them. "Snake, what the hell are you doing back there?" "Troy." Snake tensed, panic flashing in his eyes. The soldier whispered, "Stay calm. I'll handle him." But Snake wasn't calm. The fear took hold. "Troy, I was just too late." Troy stormed toward the gate, his eyes narrowing when he saw the soldier standing there. His lips curled into a venomous sneer. Well, couldn't stay away, could you?" The scarred biker and 2 of the hired muscle flanked him, forming a triangle of aggression. But the soldier didn't move. "I'm not here to fight, Troy," he said, voice calm, "but you're forcing my hand." Troy spat onto the ground. "You humiliated me, twice. You think you're just going to keep walking away? Not tonight." The soldier's voice turned colder. "I've walked away 3 times. I gave you every chance to stop this before it got worse, but you keep pushing. So this time, if you cross the line." Troy drew a switchblade from his pocket, flicking it open with a sharp click. The metallic glint caught the dim yard light. "You won't like how it ends." Silence. Heavy. Electric. Troy's lips twisted into a smirk. "You think you scare me?" The soldier shook his head, gaze unflinching. "No. But you're scared of yourself. Scared of losing control. Scared of what happens when your gang stops following you?" His eyes flicked briefly to Snake, whose expression confirmed it. Doubt was growing, and Troy could feel it. The scarred biker shifted, ready to make a move. But the soldier spoke first, voice sharp as steel. "Do it. Give me a reason." Troy hesitated. Just enough. The soldier didn't wait. In a blur, he stepped forward, disarming Troy with a swift twist, the knife clattering to the ground. A controlled strike to Troy's wrist sent the gang leader stumbling back, clutching his arm. "Enough," the soldier said firmly, voice echoing across the yard. "This ends. Now." Silence. Troy, breathing hard, looked up, broken, defeated, but his pride wouldn't let him admit it. The soldier stepped back, keeping his gaze on the entire group. "Next time, there won't be a warning." And this time, not a single man followed him as he walked away into the night. The cold night air clung to the soldier's skin as he left the storage yard behind. Gravel crunched softly under his boots, the sound fading into the hum of his truck's engine as he climbed into the cab. His hands were steady on the wheel, but his mind was a storm of calculations. Unfinished business still lingered. Troy hadn't learned his lesson. Not yet. The knife had hit the ground. The gang had frozen. But the look in Troy's eyes wasn't surrender. It was rage, festering under the humiliation of being overpowered once again. Men like him didn't know how to lose with dignity. The truck rumbled back onto the desolate road, headlights carving a narrow path through the darkness. The soldier knew what was coming next. Troy wouldn't stop here. He was past reason. And when men let their egos dictate their choices, things escalated. Quickly, violently. The soldier wasn't afraid, but he was prepared. By the time he returned to the small roadside motel, the tension in his chest hadn't fully released. Parking in the same spot as before, he scanned the lot again. Still quiet, still empty. For now. He entered the room and immediately checked the blinds, the corners, the vents. The pinhole camera he'd discovered earlier remained on the nightstand, untouched since he left. A silent message still being sent. They were watching. Let them. But something was different tonight. The weight in the air wasn't just tension. It was certainty. Troy's next move wasn't far away. The soldier sat in the corner chair, back to the wall, eyes on the door. No music, no TV. Silence was a better companion when preparing for confrontation. He rested his hands on his knees, breathing slow, measured. If they came, he would be ready. But what came next wasn't Troy. It was Snake. A soft knock, 3 quick taps. The soldier remained seated, silent, listening for a second knock. It came. 4 taps this time. "Caution!" The soldier approached the door but didn't open it fully, just enough to see Snake's pale, tense face. His eyes darted back toward the parking lot like he expected someone to be watching. "We need to talk," Snake whispered, voice trembling. The soldier stepped back, letting him inside. The door closed with a quiet click, but Snake's breathing was sharp, nervous. "Start talking," the soldier said, calm but direct. Snake rubbed his hands together, visibly shaken. "It's bad, man. Real bad. He exhaled hard, struggling to find his words. "Troy's losing it. You embarrassed him again, and now he's calling in more guys. People from out of state. I heard him talking to some dude named Richter. He's not just some thug. This guy? He runs guns. Real serious. They're planning something tomorrow. They're talking about hurting people." The soldier's eyes narrowed. "Where?" "The old mill," Snake whispered, his voice cracking. "But they're not just coming after you. They're planning to make a scene. I think Troy's trying to prove something, to make an example out of you." The soldier nodded, expression hardening. This was escalating faster than he'd expected. Troy had crossed a line. Calling in outside help was no longer about personal vengeance. It was a public display of control. "I tried to talk him down," Snake continued. "But he won't listen to me anymore. He's scared of losing face. And now he's working with people way out of his league. People who won't stop at just hurting you. Innocent people could get caught up in this." The soldier's voice dropped to a measured whisper. "Then we stop it. Tonight." Snake's eyes widened. "What? You can't just walk into the mill. It's a setup. They're going to have guns, numbers." "They have numbers," the soldier corrected. "They don't have control. That's the difference." Snake looked at the soldier with a mix of fear and awe, then nodded reluctantly. "So, what do you want me to do?" The soldier's jaw tightened. "You've already done enough by warning me. But I need you to stay clear. Troy's past reason. If he sees you with me, you'll be a target too." Snake hesitated. "I can't just leave, man. I helped him build this gang. I have to make this right." The soldier considered him for a moment before nodding. "Fine, but you stay back. I'll handle Troy." Snake exhaled shakily. "You sure about this? I mean, it's Troy, but these guys he's bringing—" The soldier's eyes were calm, steady. "I've faced worse." The old mill loomed ahead like a forgotten skeleton, its rusted metal siding weathered and broken from years of neglect. The flicker of headlights against the peeling walls announced their arrival. The soldier stopped his truck a quarter-mile away, killing the engine. Snake sat beside him, visibly tense. "They're already here," Snake whispered, pointing toward the faint glow beyond the trees. The soldier scanned the area. 2 vehicles, 3 bikes, at least 7 figures based on the shadows moving inside the mill. But the tension felt heavier than before, less chaotic, more controlled. This wasn't a gang fight anymore. It was a trap. The soldier reached under his seat, retrieving a tactical flashlight and a heavy-duty zip tie. "Stay behind the truck. Don't move until it's over." Snake nodded, swallowing hard. The soldier moved quietly through the underbrush, his footfalls silent against the damp earth. His focus narrowed, senses sharpening as he approached the mill's broken side entrance. Inside, voices echoed. Troy's, loud and aggressive, and another voice, deeper, controlled. This wasn't Troy's gang. The soldier stepped into the shadows of the mill's frame, keeping low. He saw them now. Troy, pacing near the center, and a tall, gaunt man with a black jacket standing beside a folding table stacked with cash and firearms. Richter. And Troy was clearly trying too hard to prove himself. "I don't care what it costs," Troy spat. "I want him dealt with. Tonight." Richter raised a hand, silencing him. "Patience. He'll come to you. Men like that, they always do." The soldier spoke from the shadows, voice echoing. "You're right. I did." All heads turned, weapons drawn in an instant. But the soldier wasn't standing in the open. He remained in the dark. "Let's not make this harder than it needs to be," he said calmly. "Troy, you don't want this fight." Troy's face twisted with rage. "Yes, I do." The soldier stepped forward, finally revealing himself. His gaze met Troy's, unflinching. "Then, you've made your choice." The old mill was silent for a heartbeat, the weight of the confrontation thick enough to choke the air. The soldier stood in the open now, his shadow stretching long beneath the dim flicker of a broken overhead light. Troy's face was twisted with venomous satisfaction, but it was Richter who concerned him more. The man wasn't moving, wasn't speaking, just watching, calculating. The soldier read him instantly. This wasn't Troy's fight anymore. Richter was in control. The enforcer gave a slight nod, and 2 of his men stepped forward, each drawing semi-automatic pistols from their belts. The soldier remained calm, hands at his sides, every muscle perfectly measured. "Let's talk about choices, Troy," the soldier said, voice low but echoing across the vast metal space. "You had every opportunity to walk away. I let you. Twice." Troy sneered, wiping his mouth as if tasting the bitterness of defeat all over again. "You humiliated me. You think I'm just going to let that slide? Not after what you did in front of my crew." The soldier's gaze didn't waver. "I didn't humiliate you. You did that yourself. I defended myself when you gave me no choice. And now you've brought in him." He gestured subtly toward Richter. "To fix your mistakes." Richter finally spoke, voice as smooth as it was venomous. "I don't fix mistakes. I eliminate them." The soldier nodded, voice calm. "Then you already know how this ends. Your men? They're scared. They know this isn't a fair fight, but I've faced worse, and I'm still standing." Richter's lip curled into a faint smirk. "Maybe, but even men like you have limits." Another slight hand gesture. The two armed men raised their weapons. The soldier shifted slightly, enough to angle his body and assess the room better. The narrow catwalk above, the broken cement pillars, possible cover, all calculated in seconds. "I'll say this one more time." His voice dropped lower, firmer. "Put down the guns. Walk away. Troy, this is your last chance." Troy spat onto the concrete, hate burning in his eyes. "I own this town. You're nothing." The soldier's gaze darkened. "Prove it." Troy's face twisted into a snarl. "Get him." It happened all at once. The first man fired. A deafening crack echoed as the bullet missed, grazing the pillar where the soldier had already moved. Fluid. Precise. The soldier swept low, disarming the second man with a sharp strike to the wrist. The gun clattered to the ground as the soldier followed up with a controlled elbow strike, knocking him back with a grunt. Richter didn't move, still observing, still calculating. Troy rushed in next, wild with rage, a switchblade flashing in his hand. Sloppy. Emotional. Predictable. The soldier sidestepped, his arm looping under Troy's in a joint lock that forced the blade from his grip with a painful clatter. Troy howled, dropping to his knees as his shoulder twisted unnaturally, but not broken. Control. Always control. But Richter wasn't emotional. He was precise. The enforcer pulled his own weapon, a sleek black revolver, leveling it directly at the soldier's chest. The soldier released Troy instantly, voice calm but razor-sharp. "That's a mistake." Richter's smile was cold. "I don't make mistakes." The click of the hammer echoed. And then a voice. "Drop it." Snake. Emerging from the shadows of the mill's entrance, a pistol aimed not at the soldier, but at Richter. His hands trembled, but his eyes were set with a quiet determination. Richter's gaze flicked toward him, calculating. "You're out of your league, kid." Snake's voice cracked slightly but held firm. "Maybe, but I'm done watching this go too far. Troy, look around you, man. This isn't who we are. This is murder waiting to happen." Troy, still on his knees, shook his head violently. "You don't get it, Snake. He made us look weak." Snake's grip tightened on the gun. "No, you did, and I'm done being part of it." For the first time, Richter's expression shifted from amusement to mild concern. The dynamic had shifted. Control was slipping. The soldier seized the moment. "Richter, walk away. Take your men. This doesn't have to get worse." Richter's grip on the revolver wavered. For the first time, there was doubt. Not fear, not yet, but doubt. Snake took a step closer, voice breaking. "You're not dying for this, Troy. This guy? He's been trying to stop this since the beginning, and you keep pushing like a kid throwing a tantrum." Troy's face twisted with confusion, pain, and shame all at once. The ego that had driven this entire spiral was finally fracturing under the weight of his own choices. Richter exhaled slowly, lowering the revolver. "You're lucky, soldier. Seems you made an impression." The soldier didn't blink. "We're done here." Richter nodded once, motioning for his two remaining men to gather the weapons. As they backed away, Snake finally lowered his gun too, chest heaving from the adrenaline. The silence that followed was deafening. Troy remained on his knees, shoulders slumped, no longer a threat, just defeated. Snake looked toward the soldier. "You good?" The soldier nodded. "Yeah, thanks." The last of Richter's crew disappeared into the night, their engines fading into the distance. It was over. Almost. The soldier approached Troy, who refused to meet his gaze. His voice was steady but not unkind. "You've got a choice. This can be where it ends, or you can keep chasing something that will destroy you." Troy swallowed hard, eyes glistening with the weight of failure, but for the first time, there was no defiance. Just silence. The soldier turned, nodding once to Snake before heading back toward the truck. His heart was steady, his mind clear. No more warnings. It was finished. The old mill faded into the darkness behind the soldier as he drove down the empty highway. The confrontation was over, or so it seemed, yet the weight in his chest hadn't lifted, the kind of tension that lingered after a storm, where the air still felt charged with the threat of more thunder. Troy had been broken, defeated, but men like him didn't let go of humiliation easily. His pride had been shattered, and when ego drove a man's actions, reason rarely followed. The soldier's eyes remained sharp on the road ahead, scanning the rearview mirror as if expecting trouble to reappear. He'd seen Troy slumped there in the dirt, ego crushed, but there was still something unfinished. The hired guns had left with Richter. Snake had chosen his path. But Troy was unpredictable. The pale light of dawn began breaking over the horizon, a soft glow illuminating the mist rising off the fields flanking the highway. It should have felt peaceful, but the soldier didn't trust peace. Not yet. By mid-morning, he pulled into a small-town diner, one of those places where the smell of coffee lingered permanently in the air, and the walls were covered with faded photographs of local history. He wasn't hungry, but he needed to think, and a place with people felt safer than solitude for the moment. The doorbell jingled softly as he entered. A waitress with tired eyes and a warm smile greeted him from behind the counter. "Just coffee," he said quietly, taking a corner booth with a clear view of the entrance. His back never faced the door. Old habits, necessary ones. The coffee arrived, steaming and black as the soldier stirred it slowly, thoughts circling back to the confrontation. Troy had been broken, but not broken enough. Men like him either disappeared in shame or returned even more dangerous. And his instincts screamed the latter. The doorbell jingled again. His eyes flicked up, body already tensing. It wasn't Troy. It was Snake. The younger man hesitated at the door, glancing around nervously before spotting the soldier. When their eyes met, Snake gave a small nod and approached, sliding into the booth across from him. "Coffee?" the soldier offered calmly. Snake shook his head. His hands were trembling as he fidgeted with the corner of a napkin. I just wanted to check in, make sure you were okay." The soldier's eyes narrowed slightly, reading him the way a tracker reads the wind. "I'm fine, but you're not." Snake exhaled sharply, leaning closer. "It's Troy. I thought last night was the end of it, but he's not letting it go?" The soldier's expression didn't change. "What's he planning?" Snake shook his head. "I don't know, man. But I saw him leaving town early this morning. He was talking to someone on the phone. I heard him say something about ending this for good. And he took his gun." The soldier's fingers tightened around his coffee cup. This wasn't over. Snake's voice trembled. "I'm scared, man. Not just for you, for me, for everyone. He's losing it. He's going to do something stupid." The soldier nodded once, eyes narrowing in thought. "He's already done something stupid. Now he's desperate." Snake swallowed hard. I can't stop him. I tried. I really did." The soldier's gaze softened slightly. "You made the right call walking away. You're not responsible for his choices anymore." Snake looked down, clearly torn between guilt and relief. The soldier set his coffee down, voice steady. "I'll handle it, but you need to stay out of this. If Troy contacts you, ignore it. He's looking for leverage. Don't give him any." Snake nodded, still pale but grateful. Yeah, okay. Thank you, man, for not, hurting him worse." The soldier nodded but said nothing, because deep down he knew restraint didn't always work, and the next time, Troy wouldn't be holding back. Hours later, the sun hung low in the sky, painting the landscape with streaks of amber and gold. The soldier returned to the motel, his mind sharpened for what he knew was coming. The confrontation wasn't finished, and Troy would come for him soon. The warning signs were already there: Snake's fear, the threats in the yard, the way Richter had calculated everything. But the difference now was simple. This time, the soldier wasn't waiting. The motel parking lot was quiet, but his instincts tingled as he approached his room. The door was closed, but the lock off. Barely noticeable, but slightly misaligned. A break-in. He kept his footsteps light, moving along the side of the building where the shadows ran deepest. No sound, no immediate movement. Whoever had been here was either long gone or waiting. The door opened silently under his hand, and the sight inside confirmed his suspicions. The room had been searched. Not ransacked, searched. The mattress was slightly shifted, his duffel bag unzipped but not dumped. The chair by the window turned slightly off-angle. Someone had been looking for something specific. A message, then. The soldier scanned the space, calm but focused, and then he saw it, the folded note pinned under the television remote. He opened it carefully, heart steady. "No more warnings. Tonight, the old church. You know where. Troy. No more hired muscle. No more prideful speeches." This was it, the final confrontation. The soldier folded the note, sliding it into his pocket, and without a moment's hesitation he began preparing for war. Night fell. The old church loomed like a forgotten relic on the edge of town, its windows dark and shattered, the steeple leaning slightly from age. Once a place of peace, now it stood as the setting for what would be Troy's last mistake. The soldier arrived silently, parking his truck just out of sight. He moved through the shadows with the precision of a man who had lived in them for years, every step calculated, every breath measured. He wasn't here for vengeance. He was here to end this, for good. A single figure stood in the open near the church steps, illuminated by a lone lantern. Troy. No backup this time, no enforcers. Just him, clutching a pistol loosely in his hand, his face pale but twisted with obsession. The soldier emerged from the shadows, his voice calm but unrelenting. "This is your last chance, Troy. Put the gun down, walk away." Troy's hand trembled, the gun wavering, but his voice was a whisper. You took everything from me. My respect. My crew." The soldier shook his head. "No, Troy. You did that. I warned you, and you wouldn't listen." Silence hung like a razor between them. Troy raised the gun. The soldier didn't flinch. "You pull that trigger, and your life ends tonight. Maybe not by my hand, but it will end." Troy's grip faltered, his breath caught, and for the first time his rage gave way to fear. The gun dropped to the ground. The storm was over. The sound of the pistol hitting the ground echoed louder than it should have in the silent ruins of the old church. The gun slid across the worn stone floor, coming to rest near the soldier's feet. For a moment, everything was still. Troy's face had lost its rage, his chest rising and falling in sharp, uneven breaths. His hands, once clenched with fury, now trembled at his sides. The soldier could see it. The breaking point had finally arrived. The weight of his decisions, his failures, was crushing him. The soldier remained where he stood, calm, controlled, unmoving. His gaze never left Troy's face, but he didn't reach for the weapon either. He didn't need to. The threat wasn't the gun. It was the man who had finally run out of fight. Troy swallowed hard, his voice cracking in the dim light. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I needed them to respect me again. I lost control. The soldier interrupted, his voice steady but cutting through Troy's words like a blade. No, you made choices, and every step of the way, I gave you a chance to stop, to walk away. Troy blinked, his jaw tightening. The anger was still there, buried under layers of humiliation. But something deeper had finally surfaced. Fear. Not fear of the soldier, but fear of what he'd become. What he'd lost, trying to prove himself. The soldier took a step forward, his presence towering, yet calm. You think respect comes from intimidation, from power. But real respect? It comes from knowing when to stop, from leading, not forcing. Troy shook his head violently, voice trembling. You don't understand what it's like. I built that crew. I gave them everything, and then you tore it all apart. The soldier's voice lowered. No, you tore it apart when you made them fear you, when you put your pride before their safety. Look at Snake. Look at how they followed you. Out of fear, not loyalty. Troy's lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. His head dropped slightly, the weight pressing heavier now. The soldier stepped closer, never losing that iron focus. You called me out here tonight because you wanted this to end one way, but you didn't pull the trigger, Troy. That says something. Troy finally met his eyes, his voice a whisper. I don't know how to fix this. The soldier nodded slowly. It starts with taking responsibility. Not for me, not for your gang, but for yourself. For a heartbeat, it seemed like Troy was hearing him, absorbing the truth, finally understanding the cost of his choices. But then, the sound of gravel crunching outside. The soldier's instincts flared. Not over, his head snapped toward the broken window, eyes narrowing as a shadow shifted outside. Troy noticed it too, his posture stiffening. A figure emerged from the darkness. Not Snake, not one of the local gang members. Richter. The enforcer was back, and he wasn't alone. Two men flanked him, both holding shotguns, both with the cold, detached expressions of men who had seen bloodshed and weren't afraid to see more. Richter's voice echoed coldly. You really thought it was over? That you'd just talk him down and leave? No, soldier, it doesn't end like that. The soldier remained calm, positioning himself subtly between Troy and the threat. His stance shifted slightly. Measured, ready. Richter took another step closer, his smirk sharp as a blade. You embarrassed my client here, made a fool of him, and I'm afraid my business can't afford loose ends. Troy's voice cracked. Richter, no! This isn't what I wanted. Richter didn't even glance at him. His focus was locked on the soldier. You know how this works. You should have stayed down, walked away while you had the chance. The soldier's voice was steel. I gave you that chance. You brought the fight back to me. Richter's smirk faded. Yeah. And now? I finish it. The moment hung, razor sharp. And then, the soldier moved. A blur of motion. The soldier lunged, his hand striking the barrel of the closest shotgun, angling it skyward just as the trigger squeezed. The blast roared, shattering the window behind them in a spray of glass. Before the gunman could recover, the soldier pivoted, driving his forearm into the man's throat. A choking gasp. The shotgun hit the floor with a dull clatter. The second enforcer raised his weapon, but Troy, of all people, reacted. Fueled by desperation, he tackled the man from the side, sending both crashing into the stone pews. Richter drew his pistol. The soldier was faster. In a heartbeat, he closed the gap, seizing Richter's wrist in a vice-like grip and twisting it sharply. The gun fell, skidding across the floor as Richter staggered back, eyes wide with shock. "You're done," the soldier said coldly. Richter snarled, trying to swing, but the soldier sidestepped effortlessly, delivering a precise strike to his ribs. Controlled, calculated enough to drop him gasping to his knees. Silence followed, broken only by the rasping breath of the defeated men around him. The threat was neutralized. The storm had passed. Minutes later, the police arrived, flashing lights spilling over the cracked walls of the old church. Snake had made the call, and now the authorities were handling the aftermath. Richter and his men were in custody. Troy sat quietly on the steps outside, his face pale, his pride in ruins. The soldier stood apart, watching as the chaos finally settled. Snake approached hesitantly, his voice soft. You could have finished it, but you didn't." The soldier nodded, gaze steady. Violence wasn't the answer. It never was. Control is strength, and Troy finally saw that. Snake nodded, then looked toward Troy, who was being led to a squad car, head low. "Think he learned?" Snake asked quietly. The soldier exhaled slowly. "That's not my choice, it's his." The lights faded as the police cars pulled away, leaving the soldier alone once more in the quiet of the night. The storm was over, and this time it was truly finished. The pale glow of dawn crept over the horizon as the soldier watched the last police car disappear from view, the flashing lights shrinking into the distance until they were swallowed by the early morning mist. Silence settled over the old church once again, broken, empty, and now purged of the violence that had stained it just hours earlier. The storm had passed, but its echoes lingered. The soldier stood alone on the church steps, hands resting at his sides, eyes fixed on the place where Troy had been taken away. His mind wasn't racing. It was measured, calm, yet alert in that way only experience could teach. Even with Troy in custody, Richter in chains, and the danger seemingly diffused, something still felt unfinished. It wasn't regret. He had done what was necessary, but the scars left behind, on Troy, on Snake, on the town itself, couldn't be erased by a simple act of justice. Violence left ripples, and those ripples never stopped moving. The air was crisp, the chill biting through his jacket as he returned to his truck. The town still slept, unaware of the chaos that had unfolded in the shadows. To them, the old church was just a ruin, another forgotten relic of a time long past. But for those who had been there, it was something more. A turning point. The soldier climbed into the cab, but before starting the engine he sat quietly for a moment. The weight in his chest wasn't fear, nor anger, just the somber reality that some battles never truly end. They just shift. And he wasn't sure if Troy had learned his lesson, or if this was just the beginning of another cycle. His phone buzzed in the cup holder. A message. Unknown number. "Thank you." No name, but he didn't need one. Snake. Later that morning, the soldier found himself back at the same diner where Snake had first warned him about Troy's plans. The scent of coffee still clung to the air, the sound of plates clinking as the small-town morning crowd murmured softly over breakfast. The waitress offered him a nod of recognition, refilling his cup without a word. He appreciated the silence, the simplicity of it, but he wasn't alone for long. Snake entered, looking different, lighter but still carrying the weight of everything that had unfolded. His hands no longer shook, but there was a heaviness in his eyes, like a man waking up from a bad dream that felt all too real. Snake slid into the booth across from the soldier, resting his elbows on the table. "I heard Troy's being held without bail," he began quietly, avoiding eye contact. "Charges for illegal possession, threats, assault. Richter too. They're done." The soldier nodded, sipping his coffee. "Good. It should have ended sooner." Snake nodded but hesitated. His voice was softer when he spoke again. I never thanked you. For not, taking it too far. You could have finished it, but you didn't. The soldier's gaze remained steady. It was never about finishing anything. It was about stopping something from escalating further. Violence doesn't fix pride, Snake. It only fuels it. Snake nodded slowly, absorbing the words. I get that now, but what do I do from here? Troy's crew, they're still out there. Some of them think he got what he deserved. Others? They're looking for someone new to follow. The soldier tilted his head slightly. And who do they trust? Who do they respect? Snake blinked. I don't know. Maybe no one. After all this, they're broken. The soldier shook his head. They're not broken. They're lost. Leadership isn't about fear or power. It's about example. You stepped up. You made a choice when it mattered most. They noticed. Snake looked away, discomfort clear in his face. I'm no leader. The soldier leaned forward, voice calm but commanding. You already are. Whether you accept it or not, the moment you stood against Troy, you became something they could trust. Don't waste that. Silence followed as Snake stared down at the scratched surface of the table. He was thinking, processing in a way only those who had seen the consequences of violence truly could. Finally, he exhaled. What? What happens to guys like Troy? Do they change? The soldier paused, considering his words carefully. Sometimes, but it's rare. Men like Troy get trapped in their own pride. If they can't break that cycle, it destroys them. But that's his path, not yours. Snake nodded, his face more resolute than before. Yeah, you're right. The waitress refilled the soldier's coffee again, offering a kind smile as she passed. Ordinary moments. Quiet peace. The kind of life most men took for granted. But the soldier knew better than to expect peace forever. Hours later, he packed his gear. The town had quieted once more, the storm having passed. But there was no reason to stay. His presence had been necessary, a force to reset the balance when it had been thrown into chaos. But now, his work was done. The truck rumbled to life as he pulled out of the motel parking lot, the road stretching endlessly ahead once again. But this time, there was no lingering tension in his chest. He had done what was necessary. Control had been restored. And in a world where ego and pride often ruled over reason, that was all he could ask for. The open road stretched out before the soldier, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through the quiet landscape. The town was behind him now, left to rebuild in the aftermath of Troy's downfall. The sun was low, casting long shadows over the empty fields as he drove in silence, the steady hum of the truck's engine the only companion to his thoughts. It should have felt over. It should have been over. But it wasn't. There was a lingering sense of unfinished business gnawing at the edges of his mind. Troy was in custody. Richter was taken care of. Snake had chosen the right path. And yet, something felt incomplete. The kind of incompleteness that came from knowing men like Troy didn't learn their lessons so easily. His instincts had never failed him before, and they weren't failing him now. By the time he reached the next town, dusk had settled fully, the streetlights flickering on in a quiet rhythm. He pulled into a roadside diner, not because he was hungry, but because he needed a place to think, to reflect. The door chimed softly as he entered, the scent of fresh coffee mixing with the faint aroma of fried food lingering in the air. This was the kind of place where time felt slower, where locals gathered to talk about the weather and old stories rather than the kind of violence he had just left behind. But even here, he remained vigilant. A corner booth, back against the wall, full view of the entrance, always calculating, always prepared. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, offered a warm smile as she approached. Something to eat, hon? Or just coffee? Coffee, the soldier replied with a nod. Black. She returned a moment later, the steaming cup resting gently on the table before her eyes lingered on him for just a moment longer. "Rough day." The soldier offered a slight nod. "Something like that." She didn't press further, disappearing back behind the counter. The coffee was bitter, but comforting in its simplicity. He sipped it slowly, his mind circling back to Troy. Not the man he had faced last night, but the feeling that it wasn't over. Ego like Troy's didn't dissolve in handcuffs. It simmered, festered. And when men like him stewed long enough, they either broke or came back stronger, angrier. He's not done. The sound of tires crunching outside the diner pulled his focus back. A pair of headlights swept through the window, the engine's low rumble familiar. A motorcycle. The soldier's eyes narrowed slightly as the bike came to a stop in the lot, the rider dismounting. It wasn't Troy, it was Snake. The younger man entered hesitantly, his face drawn but resolute. He spotted the soldier immediately, making his way to the booth with cautious purpose. The soldier raised an eyebrow as Snake slid into the seat across from him. "Wasn't expecting you." Snake exhaled, leaning forward on the table. His voice was hushed, urgent. "I need to talk. It's about Troy." The soldier's jaw tightened. "He's in custody." Snake nodded. "Yeah, but it won't last. I just got word from one of the guys back in town. His lawyer got him released on bail. He's out." The soldier's gaze hardened, but he remained calm. "Already?" Snake nodded. "It gets worse. He's already back with some of the crew. Not all of them, but the ones who are loyal, and they're talking, saying you humiliated him, that he's not done. He wants to settle this. For good." The soldier leaned back slightly, his face unreadable, but inside that instinct was louder now. He had known. "What's he planning?" the soldier asked quietly. Snake shook his head. "I don't know, but he's different this time. More dangerous. He's not just mad, he's obsessed. Blaming you for everything that went wrong. And the way he's talking. It's bad." The soldier's eyes narrowed. "You're not part of this anymore, Snake. You did the right thing. Why are you telling me this?" Snake swallowed hard. "Because you're the only one who can stop it. I tried. I told him it wasn't worth it, but Troy, he's too far gone." The soldier considered the words carefully, sipping his coffee as he processed the situation. Troy wasn't just angry. He was spiraling. And spiraling men made mistakes. Deadly ones. The next morning, the soldier returned to the town he thought he'd left behind. The same streets, the same old diner, but there was a heaviness now. A tension he could feel the moment he passed through the outskirts. Troy's presence was still felt. But it wasn't loud this time. It was quieter, more insidious. The kind of quiet that meant something was brewing. He parked near the gas station where it had all started, scanning the area carefully. No bikes, no Troy. But the air felt wrong, thick, heavy, like the town was holding its breath. Then he saw it, a figure lingering near the alley across the street. Not Troy, one of his men, watching him. They were testing the waters, waiting to see if he'd return, if he'd react. The soldier didn't. Not yet. Instead, he turned, walking deliberately into the station. He could feel the eyes on him as he paid for a bottle of water, his posture calm but unyielding. And when he stepped back outside, the watcher was gone. But the message had been sent. By sunset, the soldier knew the confrontation was inevitable. Troy wouldn't stop. Not now. The only question was, who would make the next move? The soldier wasn't going to wait for the answer. Not this time. He slid his jacket back on, secured the blade tucked at his hip, not as a weapon of aggression, but of defense. Control. Always control. The streets were quiet as he moved through the town center, his steps slow, deliberate. He wasn't hiding. If Troy wanted this fight, it would happen on his terms. And then, It did. The low growl of an engine. A single motorcycle. Troy. Emerging from the shadows, his face pale but twisted with the same unchecked rage that had haunted him from the start. No backup this time. No gang. Just him. But there was something different now. Something colder. More dangerous. The soldier stopped in the middle of the road, facing him. Silent. Steady. Troy killed the engine and dismounted, the tension crackling like a live wire between them. No words were exchanged. None were needed. Troy's hand drifted toward his waistband, and the soldier waited. Control. Always control. The wind howled softly through the empty street as the soldier faced Troy under the fading glow of the streetlights. The town was silent. Too silent, like it was holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable. Troy stood just a few yards away, his face pale but twisted with the same reckless anger that had driven him from the beginning. No gang this time, no backup, just him, alone. And yet that made him more dangerous. The soldier's pulse remained steady, his mind razor-sharp. He had faced threats like this before. Wounded pride was one of the deadliest poisons a man could carry. Troy wasn't here to talk. His hand hovered too close to his waistband where the handle of a pistol was barely visible under his jacket. "Troy," the soldier called out, his voice calm but unwavering. "This ends now. Put the weapon down. Walk away." Troy shook his head slowly, his teeth clenched. "You took everything from me." His voice cracked under the weight of his words. You made me look weak. I had respect. I had control. And you." He took a step forward, eyes wild. "You took it all." The soldier didn't move, his posture balanced, his voice even. "I didn't take anything. You lost control. Your pride brought you here, not me." Troy's breathing grew heavier, his hand twitching closer toward the gun. But his steps faltered, like part of him knew he was already outmatched. The soldier could see it, the conflict tearing Troy apart. But conflict wasn't enough to stop him. "You wanted respect, Troy," the soldier continued, voice low and commanding. "But you never earned it. Fear isn't respect. Control isn't strength. And this?" His gaze flicked toward the pistol. "This won't fix what's broken inside you." Troy's lips curled in a bitter snarl. "You don't get to talk down to me. You don't know what it's like to lose everything." The soldier's eyes darkened. "I know exactly what it's like." For the first time, the pain in his voice slipped through the cracks. His own ghosts, his own battles. Loss wasn't foreign to him, and neither was the temptation to let pain drive reckless choices. Troy hesitated, but only for a heartbeat. His face contorted with rage, his pride lashing out. The hand moved, a blur. The pistol cleared the waistband. The soldier was faster. In a heartbeat he closed the distance, his hand striking Troy's wrist with pinpoint accuracy. The gun was forced skyward, discharging with a deafening crack that shattered the silence but missed its mark entirely. Before Troy could react, the soldier pivoted, his other hand gripping Troy's elbow and twisting the weapon free. The pistol clattered to the asphalt. A controlled takedown. Troy hit the ground hard, gasping as the weight of the soldier's knee pressed gently into his chest. Not crushing, just enough to subdue. Control. Always control. Troy struggled beneath him, but the fight was gone from his limbs. It wasn't pain keeping him down now. It was defeat. Complete. Unquestionable. "Enough," the soldier said quietly, his voice steady but unyielding. "This is over." Troy stared up at him, chest heaving, his eyes bloodshot and wild. But the defiance was gone. The rage was flickering out, leaving nothing but exhaustion and broken pride. The soldier released him, stepping back just enough to let him sit up. The pistol lay harmlessly between them, out of reach. Troy clutched his side, wincing. You think this makes you better than me?" The soldier shook his head. No, it makes me smarter, stronger, because I know when to stop. Silence stretched between them, heavy and raw. The fight had left Troy's body completely now. He knelt there in the dirt, broken in a way no physical pain could replicate. But the soldier didn't turn away yet. He knelt, leveling his gaze with Troy's. "You've got two choices now," he said, voice calm but weighted. "Keep chasing this lie. Keep letting your pride destroy you. Or change." Troy's voice was barely a whisper. "Change." The soldier nodded. "You can come back from this, but not with a gun in your hand. Not by trying to prove you're the biggest threat in the room. That's not strength, Troy. Real strength is walking away, owning your failures, and deciding to be better." Troy looked down at the ground, his breathing ragged. For the first time, the weight of his choices seemed to press fully onto his shoulders. The soldier stood slowly, backing up without taking his eyes off him. "I'm leaving now. When I go, you have a choice to make. Walk away, or keep digging your own grave." Troy didn't speak. He just stared at the dirt, silent and shaking. The soldier turned, stepping back toward his truck as the quiet town remained undisturbed, as if the confrontation had never happened. But as he reached the door, he heard it, the sound of something being kicked across the asphalt. He glanced back. The pistol. Troy had pushed it away. His head was still low, but the message was clear. He had chosen to stop. For now. The drive out of town felt lighter somehow, as if the weight pressing on his chest had finally begun to lift. The confrontation hadn't been about winning. It had been about preventing something worse. And maybe, just maybe, Troy had finally seen it too. The soldier knew better than to expect instant change. People didn't transform overnight. But the pistol, left in the dirt, that was progress. The storm, for now, had passed. But deep down, the soldier knew peace was never permanent. There would always be another town, another man letting his pride run wild, another battle between strength and control. But he'd be ready, because real strength was never about proving power. It was about knowing when to stop. The road stretched long and empty ahead, a silver thread under the pale light of a rising moon. The soldier drove in silence, the hum of the truck's engine steady but the storm within him still lingering. The confrontation with Troy was behind him, the broken man left kneeling in the dirt, his pride shattered. But the echo remained. His grip on the steering wheel was loose, controlled, but his mind wasn't fully here. Troy had surrendered, yes, but surrender wasn't the same as change, and men like Troy? They rarely stayed down forever. The truck rumbled past a desolate stretch of countryside, the landscape a blur of shadows and faint light. The soldier had seen towns like this before, quiet places with loud problems, the kind of problems that festered beneath the surface until they exploded. He had left Troy behind, but Troy wasn't the only one out there, and that was what kept his mind sharp, even now. The small town faded further behind with every mile. Yet the tension in his chest remained. Not fear, not regret, just readiness. It was in his nature, ingrained through years of discipline and battle, the need to stay prepared, because control wasn't something you achieved and then forgot. It was earned, moment by moment. And the next challenge was always waiting. His phone buzzed from the console. Another message. Unknown number. Heard about what you did back there. Respect. Some people never learn. Stay sharp. The soldier's jaw tightened as he stared at the message. No signature, no clues. But the fact that people were hearing about what happened meant Troy's story was already traveling. Maybe from Snake. Maybe from someone else who had witnessed it all. Or maybe from Troy himself. The idea gnawed at him. Pride like Troy's didn't just dissolve. And stories of being bested didn't stay quiet long in circles like his. The storm was never fully gone. Hours passed before the soldier finally pulled into another town. This one was smaller, quieter, the kind of place where nothing much happened until it did. A gas station, a single diner, a faded motel sign blinking weakly in the night, familiar territory. He chose the motel. Not because it was comfortable, but because it was unremarkable, and unremarkable was safe. The key rattled in the lock as he stepped into the dimly lit room. Bare walls, a bed, a desk, a single window with curtains drawn tight. It was enough. The door clicked shut behind him. The first thing he did was check the window. No signs of movement outside. The lot was empty except for his truck and a single parked sedan, one that hadn't moved since he arrived. Still, his instincts whispered. He checked the lock on the door, the hinges, the vents. Every detail mattered. Not paranoia, preparation. Finally satisfied, he sat on the edge of the bed, exhaling slowly. But the tension wouldn't leave. The next morning arrived quietly. The town was just beginning to stir when the soldier left the motel, the scent of rain lingering in the air as the sun struggled to pierce the overcast sky. He wasn't staying long, just enough to rest before the road called again. Yet, as he filled his tank at the small gas station on the edge of town, the familiar hum of motorcycle engines echoed faintly in the distance. His eyes narrowed. 3 bikes. Not Troy's, but familiar enough to make his pulse shift. The riders slowed as they approached the gas station, pulling in like they belonged there. The soldier observed quietly, his posture relaxed but alert as they dismounted. One of them, a wiry man with a deep scar along his temple, locked eyes with him for a beat too long. No words, no challenge. But the look said enough. They knew. The soldier paid for his fuel, moving with measured calm back to his truck. The bikers were watching, but not moving. Not yet. Testing the waters. And he was ready if they pushed further. Back on the highway, the soldier replayed the exchange in his mind. It wasn't just curiosity. These men had heard something. Maybe they were connected to Troy. Maybe they were just part of the same culture where reputation traveled fast. Either way, the message was clear. Troy's story hadn't ended, and the ripples were still spreading. By midday, the landscape had shifted into rolling hills and open plains, the road winding lazily through stretches of farmland. The soldier felt the tension ease slightly, but never fully. He knew better than to let his guard down. Stopping for a quick meal at a roadside diner, he kept to his usual habits, a corner seat with a view of the door. But this time, something felt different. The other patrons were too quiet. Conversations hushed when he entered. Eyes lingered a beat longer than they should have. Word had traveled. But not fear, not anger, respect. And for the first time in a long while, that respect wasn't forced. It was earned. A few seats down, an older man with weathered hands and a trucker's jacket offered a nod of quiet acknowledgement. The kind of nod shared between men who understood conflict without words. The soldier returned it. Because here, for now, the storm was calm. But the road always called. And control wasn't something you claimed once. It was something you carried. As he climbed back into his truck and turned the key, the radio crackled to life with static before settling on a low, fading country song. The road stretched ahead once more. Not a battle, not a mission, but a choice. And he was ready, because this time he knew exactly who he was. The road unfolded endlessly before the soldier, a winding ribbon of asphalt cutting through the quiet landscape. The miles passed beneath his tires, yet the weight of unfinished business pressed heavier with every turn. He had left the town behind, left Troy broken and Snake on a better path, but something still felt unresolved. Not the threat, not the violence. It was the reminder of before. Long before this town, long before Troy's bruised ego spiraled into chaos. The memory stirred, the mission overseas, the ambush, the lessons of control carved into his mind when chaos could have consumed him. He had learned then that strength wasn't just in force, but in restraint. But some men never learned. Troy's face lingered in his mind. That same reckless pride. The need to prove something, anything, to feel like he mattered. The soldier had seen it in others before, and some of those men hadn't made it out alive. The distant hum of an engine broke him from his thoughts. His eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. A single motorcycle. Not approaching quickly, hanging back, following. The tension that had begun to fade now returned like a coiled spring. Not a coincidence. For the next 10 miles the bike stayed there, never closing the gap but never fading out of sight either. The soldier adjusted his speed slightly, testing. The motorcycle matched it, staying at a measured distance. It was calculated, and it told him everything he needed to know. Troy wasn't finished, but the soldier wasn't running either. When the next town appeared, a small, quiet stop with a single gas station and a diner, he made his move. Slowing deliberately, he guided the truck into the lot, parking near the pumps where visibility was wide. No blind spots, no corners. The motorcycle followed but kept its distance, pulling into a shadowed spot on the far side of the lot. The rider didn't dismount. The soldier stepped out of his truck, calm, composed, his every movement precise as he began refueling. He felt the eyes on him, watching, calculating. But he wasn't the one under pressure. They were. The rider finally moved. The engine shut off. A figure dismounted, a lean, dark-haired man with a worn leather jacket. Not Troy, someone else. But the eyes told him everything. Connected. The man approached slowly, hands visible. Not aggressive, but not friendly either. "Nice truck," the biker said, voice low but steady. The soldier didn't reply immediately. He finished refueling, capping the tank before meeting the man's gaze directly. "Something you need?" The biker shrugged. "Maybe. Heard some stories about a guy matching your description. Took down a whole crew. Humiliated them. You know anything about that?" The soldier's expression didn't change. "I don't do stories. I deal in facts." The biker's lips curled into a thin smirk. "That's so. Because Troy's been talking. Says you made a fool out of him. Says you're not as tough as you think." The soldier exhaled slowly, keeping his voice calm but firm. Troy had choices. He made the wrong ones. It wasn't personal, until he made it personal. The biker nodded slightly, rocking on his heels. "I get it. But you understand. Some guys don't let things go so easy, especially when you make them look small in front of their crew." The soldier's eyes narrowed slightly. "What's your name?" "Carter," the man replied. "And I'm not here to start trouble. I'm here to find out if Troy's right." "Right about what?" Carter leaned in just enough to lower his voice. "Right about you being dangerous." Silence. The soldier's voice dropped, controlled and steady. "You want to find out firsthand? Or are you here for something else?" Carter hesitated. The tension hung thick, but there was a flicker in his eyes, respect mixed with uncertainty. He wasn't as reckless as Troy. Not yet. "I just came to see," Carter finally said. "Troy's loud. But loud men don't last. I'm not here for him. I'm here to see if you're really as disciplined as they say." The soldier nodded once. "Then you've seen enough." Carter met his gaze, considering for a long moment. Then he nodded. "No hard feelings," Carter said, turning back toward his bike. "But you should know. Troy's not done talking. Might be better to stay clear of this town." The soldier watched him mount the bike, the engine roaring back to life. He didn't reply, because men like Troy didn't need words. They needed silence, and Carter had just confirmed it. The story wasn't over. That night the soldier sat in his motel room, the worn chair pressed against the wall as he stared out the window. The small town was quiet, peaceful. But his instincts told him that Troy's ripple effect hadn't faded. The visit from Carter was a test, a way to measure how far he could be pushed. But the real question wasn't whether Troy would come back. It was whether Troy would survive his own pride. The soldier had given him every chance, offered control, restraint, and still, men like Troy always found ways to burn themselves down. But the soldier wasn't here to play savior. He was just here to remind them. Some battles aren't won with fists. They're won by knowing when to walk away. And as the distant sound of engines rumbled faintly from somewhere beyond the horizon, the soldier knew. This wasn't the end. Not yet. The town slept beneath a pale moon, but the soldier wasn't sleeping. He sat motionless in the motel's corner chair, back pressed against the wall, eyes fixed on the window where the blinds remained slightly parted. The hum of distant engines had come and gone over the past hour, never lingering but never completely fading either. A test! Carter's warning wasn't a bluff. Troy hadn't let this go. The ripple was growing. The room was silent except for the steady tick of the wall clock. But the soldier's mind was as sharp as ever, replaying every encounter, every word spoken in the gas station, the storage yard, and the church. Troy's anger had festered into obsession, and obsession turned men reckless. And reckless men get people hurt. The soldier reached into the nightstand, checking his gear. Just precaution. No firearms. He never needed them. But the tactical blade remained secured inside his jacket, an extension of his training rather than a threat. He didn't seek violence, but he was always prepared for it. The sun had barely begun to rise when the call came. A sharp buzz from his phone, vibrating against the wooden nightstand. Unknown number. He answered without a word, his voice steady. Yeah. A voice he recognized immediately. Snake. Quiet. Tense. You were right, Snake said, breath shaky. He's back. Troy's back. And he's not alone. The soldier remained calm. How many? Snake exhaled hard, as if struggling with the truth. 5, 6, maybe. Not locals. Out-of-towners. Rough types. They're at the old roadhouse. Troy's talking like he's got something to prove. The soldier closed his eyes briefly. Of course he is. Did he mention me? He asked quietly. Snake hesitated. Yeah, but it's not just talk this time. He's different. More desperate. You need to be careful, man. The soldier nodded, his voice calm but firm. I don't need careful. I need to know where he's going next. Snake whispered, He wants you to find him. The roadhouse. Tonight. Says it's the last time you'll walk away. The line went dead. The soldier stared at the phone for a moment longer, then set it down carefully. The trap had been set. But Troy was playing the wrong game. The old roadhouse sat on the far edge of town, a forgotten relic of a place where trouble liked to breed. Rusted signs, a half-shattered neon light flickering above the entrance, and a gravel lot that stretched too wide for comfort. The soldier arrived as twilight set in, parking his truck in the shadows, close enough to see but not be seen. The lot was full. 7 bikes, 1 black SUV, and Troy's. The soldier scanned the area, already noting the patterns. 2 sentries near the entrance, 1 smoking, 1 pacing near the side door. Armed, based on the weight in their jackets. Not amateurs, but not professionals either. Carter's warning echoed in his mind. He's not done talking. No, this wasn't about talking anymore. This was the point where men like Troy stopped trying to win and just tried to destroy. The roadhouse itself was dimly lit, the kind of place where shadows clung too thickly and conversations were kept hushed. The scent of stale beer mixed with cigarette smoke as the soldier stepped inside, moving with quiet authority. And then he saw him, Troy, sitting at the center of the room like a king on a broken throne. Legs spread wide, a half-empty glass in front of him. but the wildness in his eyes told the truth. This wasn't confidence. This was desperation. The men flanking him hired muscle. Tough, but sloppy. The kind paid to make a point, not win a war. Troy's gaze snapped to him immediately, and the sneer returned. "Well, look who finally showed." The soldier didn't answer. He let the silence speak, let the tension coil tighter. Troy stood, swaying slightly but still holding himself tall. His voice echoed louder than necessary, trying to claim dominance in the room. "You came all this way. Guess you finally figured out how this ends." The soldier's voice remained calm, level. "It doesn't have to end, Troy." Troy's grin twisted. "Oh, it has to, because you took everything from me, my crew, my respect. You humiliated me in front of everyone, and you think you can just walk away?" The soldier's gaze stayed locked on him. "I didn't take anything. You lost it when you stopped leading. You think this is strength? Surrounding yourself with cowards who won't tell you the truth?" Troy's hand slammed the table, the glass tipping over with a sharp crack. "Don't talk to me about strength. You don't know." The soldier took a single step closer, deliberate, unyielding. "I know strength," he said softly. "I know it's not about violence, or proving something. Real strength is restraint, control." Troy's face twisted further, his voice shaking. "I am in control." The soldier shook his head. "No, you're not." Silence. Heavy, waiting for the spark. And then, Troy snapped. A knife, quick, drawn from his belt. He lunged, but the soldier was ready. A blur of motion. The soldier sidestepped, twisting Troy's wrist in a fluid motion that sent the blade clattering to the floor. With a controlled sweep, he brought Troy to his knees, disarmed, defenseless. The bar was silent. No one moved. The soldier knelt close, his voice quiet but filled with finality. "This is over, Troy. Not because I'm stronger, but because you never understood what strength really is." Troy's chest heaved, but there was no fight left, just exhaustion, humiliation, defeat. And the soldier stood, turning to face the rest of the bar. His voice echoed louder now, commanding but calm. "Go home. This fight is finished." And this time, nobody argued. The storm had passed. The roadhouse had fallen into complete silence. The only sound was the faint hum of the old neon sign outside, flickering like it was barely clinging to life. Troy knelt on the sticky floor, breath ragged, his face twisted in a mixture of pain and shame as the soldier released his grip. The knife lay forgotten between them, its metallic glint catching the dim light as it rested harmlessly on the ground. The fight was over, but the lesson wasn't. The soldier took a step back, eyes scanning the room. The hired men flanking Troy, silent, tense, made no move to retaliate. They had seen enough. They weren't loyal to Troy. They were loyal to power, and power wasn't on Troy's side anymore. Troy coughed, clutching his wrist where the soldier had wrenched it. You think this makes you better than me?" His voice was hoarse, but the rage still lingered, faint but present, like embers refusing to die. The soldier's gaze never wavered, calm, controlled. "This isn't about being better, Troy. It never was. It's about knowing when to stop." Troy spat onto the floor, his pride still gnawing at him, but it lacked the fire it once had. You made me look weak." The soldier shook his head. "You made yourself look weak. By letting your pride control you, by thinking violence and fear make you stronger. They don't. They never did." Troy stared up at him, breathing hard, his fists still trembling, but not from pain. From realization. The truth was finally sinking in, cutting deeper than any wound. The soldier leaned slightly closer, his voice softer but no less commanding. "You can get back up from this, Troy. You can rebuild. But it won't happen by trying to destroy everyone who challenges you. Strength is restraint, control. You want respect? Earn it. By being better. Not by burning everything around you. Silence. Troy looked down, his shoulders sagging as the weight of those words pressed heavier on him than any blow could have. The hired men exchanged uncertain glances, waiting for a cue from Troy. But none came. Not this time. The soldier bent down slowly, picking up the fallen knife. He held it in his hand for a moment, then placed it deliberately on the bar counter, well out of Troy's reach. A final statement. No threats, no violence, just an ending. And as the soldier turned, stepping toward the exit, Troy finally broke the silence behind him. "Wait!" The soldier paused but didn't turn around. Troy's voice was different this time, quieter, strained. I don't know how to come back from this." The soldier's jaw tightened, the memories of his own past stirring for a moment. The battles, the loss, the choices that had brought him here. He turned, just enough to meet Troy's eyes one last time. "It starts with accountability. Admit what you did. Make it right with your crew. Not for them, but for yourself." Troy nodded, just barely. It wasn't full surrender, but it was enough, for now. The cold night air met the soldier as he stepped out of the roadhouse. The gravel crunched beneath his boots, the wind carrying the faint scent of rain as he approached his truck. The town was quiet. The storm was finally passing. And this time, he knew it was truly over. The roar of the roadhouse had dimmed into nothing but a memory, one that would linger with Troy far longer than bruises or broken pride ever could. Snake was waiting near the edge of the lot, leaning against his motorcycle with a mixture of awe and disbelief written across his face. He hadn't stepped inside the roadhouse. He hadn't needed to. You actually talked him down," Snake murmured, shaking his head as the soldier approached. The soldier nodded, voice calm. "It wasn't about talking him down. It was about showing him there was nothing left to prove." Snake rubbed the back of his neck, still processing it all. "I don't get it, man. I've seen guys like Troy before. They don't stop. They don't change." The soldier's expression didn't shift. "Some don't, but some do. The ones who survive? They're the ones who realize strength isn't about being feared. It's about knowing when to stop." Snake nodded slowly, absorbing the words. And for the first time since this all began, the weight of the past seemed to lift from his face. He wasn't just watching anymore. He was learning. The soldier climbed into his truck, the door closing with a soft thud as the town faded behind him. The headlights carved through the darkness, the road stretching long and endless once more. But this time, there was a quiet peace. The storm had passed, and somewhere back in that broken town, a man who had once lost himself in pride was finally facing the consequences of his choices. Maybe Troy would change. Maybe he wouldn't. But the soldier had done what he came to do. He hadn't proven his strength through violence. He had proven it through control. And in the end, that was the lesson Troy, and the town, would never forget. The night stretched endlessly before the soldier, the steady hum of the truck's engine his only companion as he drove farther from the town where everything had finally come to a close. The confrontation at the roadhouse had ended without bloodshed. Without another cycle of violence Troy had been so desperate to continue. But as the empty highway unfurled beneath his tires, he knew better than to believe the lessons would be permanent. Some men changed, some didn't. And the ones who didn't were bound to return, sooner or later. The faint glow of the dashboard reflected in his eyes, his expression calm yet still calculated, always prepared for the storm to return. He had delivered his message. Troy had finally broken, but men like him rarely stayed down. If ego and pride weren't rooted out completely, they festered, and that was the danger. Not violence, but the idea of it. the sickness of pride disguised as strength. Hours later, dawn painted the horizon with soft hues of amber and violet. The soldier slowed the truck, pulling into a quiet overlook where the land stretched wide, open, endless. Silence hung heavy here, the kind of silence that felt like peace, not the fragile, temporary kind, but real peace. He stepped out of the cab, the wind brushing against his face as he surveyed the open plains below. The tension that had gripped his chest for days felt lighter now. Not gone, but lighter. The confrontation with Troy wasn't the first of its kind, and it wouldn't be the last. Men like him were everywhere. Small towns, big cities, the same sickness, the same need to prove themselves through control rather than understanding. The same mistake he had seen in himself, once. A long time ago. The memories returned, unbidden. A different place, a different battlefield. The scars still invisible yet etched into his mind just as deeply as the ones on his skin. The day he had lost his team. The day he had let his anger win. He had been younger then, less measured, less controlled, and when the mission went sideways, when his men had fallen one by one, he hadn't handled it with restraint. He had let the pain consume him. And he had nearly lost himself in the process. That was what had driven him ever since. Not revenge, not punishment, discipline, control. Because he had learned the hardest way possible that giving into rage didn't make you stronger. It made you weaker. And men like Troy? They were walking that same path. The same path he had barely crawled back from. Maybe that's why he had shown Troy mercy. Maybe that's why he had given him another chance instead of ending things completely. Because once, someone had done the same for him. A bird's call echoed through the vastness, pulling him back into the present. The sun had climbed higher now, painting the plains in gold. And for the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to feel something close to peace. But not comfort, not softness. The road didn't allow for softness. It required readiness. And as he climbed back into his truck, adjusting the rearview mirror, the soldier knew one thing with certainty. Troy was finished. But the world was full of men just like him. And the road? The road was far from over. Back in the town he had left behind, the fallout had already begun to settle. Snake sat alone in the same diner where he had first met the soldier, hands wrapped around a half-empty cup of coffee, staring blankly out the window. The tension was still there, lingering like the aftermath of a storm. But something had shifted. The way the other patrons looked at him now was different. Less fear, more respect. Because Snake hadn't just stood by this time. He had made a choice. He had acted. And Troy was gone. The doorbell chimed, breaking his thoughts. A sheriff's deputy entered, scanning the room before his eyes landed on Snake. "Hey," the deputy called, approaching the booth. "Just thought you should know. Troy left town this morning." Snake blinked, setting his cup down. "Left? Just like that?" The deputy nodded, slipping his hands into his belt. "Guess he didn't like how things turned out. Probably thought it was better to disappear than deal with the fallout." Snake didn't answer immediately, because deep down he knew that wasn't the full truth. Troy hadn't chosen to leave. He had been broken. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. But out there, somewhere beyond the town limits, Troy sat in his battered truck, gripping the steering wheel with white-knuckled hands as the radio whispered static. His reflection stared back at him from the cracked rearview mirror. Hollow eyes, defeated. The rage hadn't vanished. It still burned, low and ugly beneath his skin. But the fear? That was new. Not fear of the soldier, not fear of losing power. It was the fear of knowing. For the first time, he wasn't untouchable. He wasn't the biggest threat in the room. He had been shown restraint, mercy. But deep down, he knew what would happen if he crossed that line again. And this time, there wouldn't be mercy. The soldier drove west, the highway stretching endlessly ahead. The town behind him was safer now, stronger, but there would be more. Always more. Because pride, fear, and anger didn't disappear. They just waited for weaker men to carry them. But the soldier wasn't afraid. He was ready. Because real strength was never about proving power. It was about knowing when to stop. The highway stretched on endlessly, a vast ribbon of asphalt disappearing into the pale horizon. The soldier drove in silence, the sun beginning its slow descent behind him, casting the road ahead in soft, orange hues. The echoes of his confrontation with Troy had begun to fade, but the lessons lingered, etched deep, unshakable. But as the miles passed, a different kind of silence filled the cab. Not peace, not closure, a silence born from memory. It wasn't just Troy he had left behind. It was the reflection of a younger version of himself, the one who hadn't known how to control the fire. The memory came unbidden. A different town, a different battlefield. The night was colder, the air thick with rain. The mission was routine, until it wasn't. His unit had been cornered, pinned down under heavy fire. He had made a choice. He had let the heat of the moment override the discipline drilled into him. He had charged in alone, hoping sheer force could break the tide. And it had, but at a cost. 2 men under his command had paid the price for his recklessness. 2 lives lost because he'd believed strength meant overpowering. It had taken him a long time to understand that real strength wasn't just action. It was restraint. The road ahead curved slightly, pulling the soldier back into the present. He blinked, focusing once more on the empty stretch before him. The weight of the past was just that, the past. But men like Troy reminded him of who he had once been, and who he refused to become again. The sign for a rest stop came into view. Small, isolated, nothing more than a vending machine and a dimly lit parking lot. Perfect for quiet reflection. He slowed the truck, gravel crunching softly under the tires as he pulled in. No other vehicles. Just the stillness of a cooling night. The soldier stepped out, the scent of damp earth lingering as he leaned against the hood of the truck, watching the last traces of daylight melt into the horizon. For the first time in days, his heartbeat felt steady. No threats, no looming confrontation, just quiet. But quiet never lasted. The faint rumble of an approaching engine stirred him from his thoughts. Low, steady, a motorcycle. The soldier's posture didn't shift. He didn't reach for his blade. Not yet. But his mind sharpened, scanning the darkness as the bike rolled into the rest stop, its single headlight illuminating the gravel before cutting off. A lone rider dismounted. Snake. The younger man removed his helmet, setting it carefully on the seat before approaching, hands visible, expression guarded. The soldier remained calm but alert. "Wasn't expecting you." Snake exhaled, shoving his hands into his jacket pockets. "Yeah, well, wasn't planning to be here either, but I figured you should know." The soldier waited, saying nothing. Snake ran a hand through his hair, clearly working up the courage to speak. "It's about Troy. He's gone, left town. But I heard from someone who knows him. He's still talking, still blaming you. Said he's heading south, looking for people to back him up again." The soldier's jaw tightened. He had suspected as much. "He'll make the same mistakes," the soldier said quietly. "And next time, it won't end as clean." Snake nodded, voice softer now. "Yeah, I know. He hesitated. "I just didn't want to leave things like that. I mean, you saved me back there, stopped me from being part of something I couldn't take back. I owe you." The soldier shook his head. "You don't owe me anything, Snake. You made your choice. That's what matters." Snake nodded slowly, but then asked, "But what happens when he comes back? What if he doesn't stop?" The soldier's gaze didn't waver. "Then I'll stop him. Again." Silence stretched between them, heavy yet honest. Snake finally exhaled, stepping back toward his bike. "Thank you," he murmured before swinging his leg over the seat. The soldier nodded once, watching as the bike roared back to life and disappeared into the night. Alone again. The soldier stood there a moment longer, the chill seeping deeper into his skin. Snake was safe. The town was quiet. But the road never stayed quiet for long. Troy might have been broken. For now. But there would always be another Troy, because men who let their pride dictate their choices rarely learned. And when the storm returned, because it would return, he would be ready. Because real strength wasn't about the fight. It was about knowing when to fight and when to walk away. The road stretched endlessly beneath the fading twilight, the soldier's truck cutting through the quiet night with nothing but the steady hum of the engine to accompany his thoughts. The conversation with Snake lingered, the weight of unfinished business pressing heavier with each passing mile. Troy was gone, but not finished. And the soldier knew it. Men like Troy didn't disappear quietly. They retreated, regrouped, rebuilt their rage until it boiled over again. And when it did, the fallout always hit more than just the man they targeted. It hit everyone around them. The soldier had seen it before. Pride turning into obsession, dragging entire lives down in the process. And despite how far he'd driven, how many miles lay between him and that broken town, he could feel it like a storm waiting just over the horizon. The air was too still, the road too quiet. He pulled into a roadside diner just past midnight, the neon open sign flickering weakly in the fogged window. It was the kind of place where the coffee was strong, the conversations minimal, and the faces forgettable. Exactly the kind of place he needed. Sliding into a booth near the back, he kept his back against the wall, eyes subtly tracking the entrance. Habit. Necessary habit. The waitress approached, barely sparing him a glance as she set down a steaming cup of coffee. "Long night?" she asked with mild curiosity. The soldier nodded, but didn't elaborate. His focus remained on the window, watching headlights drift past in the distance like pale ghosts. "Refills free if you're staying a while," she added before turning away. But he wasn't staying. Not long, anyway. He was halfway through his coffee when the door opened. Two men entered, their presence shifting the energy of the diner just slightly. They weren't loud. They weren't obvious. But the soldier felt it immediately. The weight of their gazes. They weren't here for food. They were here for him. The taller of the two had a lean, wiry frame, his face weathered and scarred, like someone who'd seen too many fights he shouldn't have walked away from. The second was broader, heavier, the kind of man who relied more on bulk than skill. The soldier didn't react outwardly. He continued sipping his coffee, eyes downcast but watching every movement in the reflection of the window beside him. They didn't sit. They lingered, talking quietly near the counter but never ordering. The taller one glanced his way twice. The second didn't break eye contact once. Testing. The soldier had seen this dance before. Finally, the taller man approached. Slow, calculated steps. "Coffee good?" the man asked, his voice calm but probing. The soldier met his gaze, his expression neutral. "It's fine." A beat of silence. The tension coiled tighter. The taller man folded his arms. "Don't suppose you remember a guy named Troy? Said you had some disagreement a while back?" The soldier's jaw tightened just slightly. "I remember." The man nodded, the faintest smirk on his lips. "Yeah, well, he remembers you too. Says you got lucky. Said you embarrassed him. That true?" The soldier shook his head. "No, he embarrassed himself." The smirk faltered. The heavier man shifted near the door now, blocking the exit. "They're closing the space." The taller man's voice dropped lower. "See, we got a problem then. Troy says he's got unfinished business, wants you to know he's coming back, and this time he won't be alone." The soldier remained calm, controlled. He already wasn't alone. How'd that work out for him? The man's face twisted slightly. You think you're untouchable? The soldier set his coffee down with a deliberate calmness, voice steady but edged with finality. No, but I am patient and smart, and if Troy wants to make this mistake again, he'll regret it. Silence. The heavier man shifted again, but the soldier was already prepared. Every muscle coiled, every angle measured. But then the taller man held up a hand, stopping his partner. A test, and the soldier had just passed it. Message delivered, the man muttered, stepping back. Guess we'll see you around. They both left, the door swinging shut behind them, the tension in the diner lifting like the weight of a passing storm. But the soldier knew this wasn't over. It never was. Back on the road, the night pressed heavier against the windows of the truck. The soldier drove, without music, without distraction, the echoes of that encounter lingering. Troy was still reaching, still trying to prove something. But the soldier had stopped being afraid of men like him a long time ago, because real strength wasn't measured by how many you could intimidate. It was measured by knowing when the fight wasn't worth it, and when it was. The next town was smaller, sleepier, the kind of place where trouble rarely showed itself, but when it did, it echoed for years. The soldier pulled into the parking lot of a worn-down motel, the neon vacancy sign flickering overhead, and as he climbed out of the truck, the chill in the air seemed sharper. The storm wasn't gone. It was just circling back. But this time, when it returned, he'd be ready, because he always was. The worn-down motel sat in the quiet grip of twilight, its neon vacancy sign sputtering as if struggling to stay alive. The soldier stood by his truck, the chill in the air sharper than before. There was a weight pressing against the silence, the kind that lingered when a storm was just beyond the horizon. He could feel it. This wasn't over. The encounter at the diner had been a message, but not the final one. Troy was still circling, still searching for a way to reclaim the pride he'd lost. But this time, there was something different, something more dangerous. The desperation had grown, and desperate men were unpredictable. The motel room was as plain as the others, faded curtains, a single bed, and a chair by the window. The soldier checked the locks, the hinges, the window frame. Every detail mattered. Even the ordinary could be turned into a threat if ignored. Control. Always control. He set his bag on the bed, resting his blade within reach on the nightstand. No weapons drawn. Not yet. But readiness wasn't about expecting violence. It was about preventing it before it arrived. Midnight came, and the town was silent. Too silent. The soldier sat in the chair, back to the wall, the soft hum of the heating unit the only sound. His mind stayed sharp, scanning the subtle noises, distant traffic, the creak of settling wood, the occasional flicker of the motel sign outside, and then he heard it. The faint rumble of an engine, not the steady, casual sound of a passing vehicle. Slow, intentional, waiting. The soldier shifted, rising from the chair and moving toward the window, parting the curtains just enough to see. A single motorcycle, parked at the far end of the lot. The rider remained seated, half shrouded by shadow, but there was no mistaking the posture. Watching. Waiting. Troy. The soldier didn't react, didn't move for the weapon. Instead, he let the silence stretch. Testing. 5 minutes passed. The rider didn't move. 10. The tension built like a bowstring pulled tighter. Then, with a low growl, the motorcycle pulled away, disappearing down the road. The message had been sent. And the soldier had answered with silence. Not fear, dominance. But the next morning, the storm returned. It started with the scrape of gravel in the parking lot just before dawn. The soldier had been awake already, senses sharp as the sky began to pale. 3 bikes this time. Not Troy. The same men from the diner. Carter among them. They weren't hiding anymore. The soldier stepped outside, his breath visible in the cold morning air as he faced them. Calm. Measured. The tallest of the three, Carter, removed his helmet, his face stony but not reckless. He was here for a confrontation, but not chaos. Not yet. Carter approached, his voice carrying over the cold wind. "Troy says he ain't finished with you." The soldier remained still, his voice calm but unyielding. "Troy's problem isn't with me anymore. It's with himself." Carter's jaw tightened. "Yeah, well, he don't see it that way. Says you made him look weak. He wants you to pay for that." The soldier shook his head. "I didn't make him weak. He did that to himself when he let his pride blind him." Silence. Heavy. The third biker shifted uneasily, his eyes darting between them, but Carter held his ground. "This is your last chance, soldier. Troy's gathering more men, bigger crowd this time. He's saying it won't just be you next time." The soldier nodded slightly. "I'm not looking for a fight." Carter's lips curled slightly. "You already found one." The soldier's gaze sharpened. "Then tell Troy this. If he keeps chasing this fight, it won't end with just bruises next time. For him, or anyone he drags with him." Carter studied him for a long moment. Then he nodded. And, just like that, the bikers turned and rode out. But the soldier knew. The storm wasn't retreating. It was just circling back, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Later that day, Snake called. His voice was urgent. "Man, you gotta leave town. He's not just talking anymore. He's calling in favors. I heard his guys saying they're planning to catch you off guard. Tonight." The soldier remained calm. "I'm not running, Snake." "You don't get it. It's not just him anymore. He's brought in outlaws, not the local crew. Guys who don't care about proving a point, they care about blood." The soldier's voice dropped. "Then they'll learn the hard way. I gave Troy every chance. I showed restraint. But if he forces my hand—" Snake cut him off. "Don't do it, man. You're better than that. You proved it already." The soldier exhaled, his grip tightening on the phone. "I'm not looking for violence, but if they bring it, I'll finish it." Night fell. The wind howled stronger now, carrying the scent of rain as the storm finally crept closer. The soldier sat in his truck, parked at the edge of town near the old rail yard, an open space. No ambush points. No cover for Troy to hide behind. If he came, it would be here. And the soldier was ready. The headlights appeared just after midnight. 3 bikes, 2 trucks. The roar of engines shattered the quiet. Troy was leading this time. No hiding, no posturing. It was time to end this. The soldier stepped from the truck, calm, composed, meeting Troy's gaze as the gang pulled to a stop. No words were exchanged. Because this time there was nothing left to say. The night pressed heavy against the old rail yard, the scent of rain clinging to the air as the headlights of Troy's convoy carved pale streaks across the cracked pavement. The hum of idling engines was the only sound, low and menacing, vibrating through the ground like distant thunder. Troy stood at the front of his crew, the same twisted glare etched into his face. But something was different this time. He wasn't wild. He wasn't reckless. He was cold. Men flanked him now. Not his old crew, not Snake. Hardened men, outlaws, the kind of men who didn't care about bruised pride, only the pay. The soldier remained calm, standing with his hands at his sides, back straight, breath steady. The control was absolute, but his mind was calculating. 5, 3 bikers, 2 men from the trucks, armed, no sign of Carter. Troy's not leading. He's performing. This was no longer about ego. This was a spectacle, a final play to reclaim what he thought was power. Troy took a step forward, his boots crunching against the gravel. "You should have left town," he spat, his voice echoing in the night air. "But no, you had to keep pushing." The soldier's voice was calm but unyielding. I didn't push. You did. And now you've dragged these men into your mistake. Troy's face twisted, but the soldier could see the crack, the hesitation beneath the mask. He was losing control. One of the outlaws stepped forward, his face hard, a crowbar dangling from his grip. We're not here to talk, man. We're here to finish this. The soldier's voice dropped, cold, sharp. Then, you've already lost. Troy's lip curled. You think you're better than us? Untouchable? The soldier shook his head, voice calm. No, but I know this isn't strength, and I know you've already made your choice. So make your next one carefully. Silence. The wind shifted. The rain started to fall, light at first, but steady. The tension coiled so tight it felt like the air itself was holding its breath. And then, Troy snapped. Get him! The storm broke. The outlaw with the crowbar lunged first, wild, untrained. The soldier stepped into the attack, a fluid sidestep as he caught the man's wrist, twisting sharply. The crowbar clanged to the ground as the soldier followed through with a controlled strike to the ribs. Precise, enough to drop him, gasping. The second attacker came from the left, a knife flashing in the dim light. The soldier pivoted, avoiding the blade, his forearm deflecting the strike before delivering a sharp elbow to the side of the man's head. Down. Out. Cold. The third came slower, a biker with a chain wrapped around his fist. Smarter. More cautious. The soldier's voice cut through the rain. This isn't your fight. Walk away. The biker hesitated, eyes flicking to Troy. Troy snarled. Do it, or you're next. The biker looked back at the soldier, then dropped the chain. Smart. But Troy wasn't finished. The gang leader drew a pistol from his belt, the cold steel trembling in his hand as he leveled it at the soldier. The rain hit harder now, streaking down both their faces, thunder rumbling distantly like the earth itself was warning them. The soldier remained calm. His voice dropped to a whisper. You don't want to do this. Troy's grip tightened, knuckles pale. You don't get to talk to me like I'm nothing. I'm not weak. I won't lose. The soldier took a single step closer, unarmed, unflinching. You've already lost. Troy's breath hitched. The fear was visible now. Not fear of the soldier, but fear of what he had become, how far he had spiraled. I can't back down, Troy whispered, his voice breaking. The soldier's eyes softened, but his tone remained firm. Yes, you can. A long silence. The rain poured harder. And then, Troy's grip faltered, the gun lowered. The soldier took the pistol gently from his trembling hand, ejecting the magazine and sliding the round from the chamber with quiet efficiency. No threats, no violence, just control. Troy collapsed to his knees, the weight of everything crashing down on him. The fear, the shame, the broken pride. The soldier knelt beside him, voice calm but piercing. This is what strength looks like, Troy. Knowing when to stop, knowing when to walk away. Troy's shoulders shook. The fight gone. Finally. The outlaws who remained watched in stunned silence, uncertain now. Without Troy leading the charge, there was nothing left to fight for. The soldier rose, turning to the group. His voice echoed through the rain. Go home. This is finished. And one by one, they left. Snake was waiting by the edge of the rail yard as the soldier approached, soaked through but steady. His face held disbelief. You stopped him. Again. No one got hurt. How? The soldier shook his head. It was never about hurting anyone. Troy wasn't my enemy. His pride was. Snake nodded slowly, watching as Troy was helped into one of the trucks, silent and broken. Think he'll learn this time? Snake asked quietly. The soldier stared at the retreating convoy. That's not my choice. It's his. The rain had finally eased by the time the soldier returned to his truck. the distant lights of the town visible on the horizon. It was over. For now. But there would be other towns, other storms, other men who thought strength came from power instead of restraint. And when they came, he would be ready. Because real strength wasn't about breaking men. It was about teaching them to rise,